Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Farmington Hills City Council for August 9th, 2021. I'm going way, way back.
I haven't been elected yet.
2021. It's 2021. I've been in receipt of several blue slips for people who want to speak on item number 11, which is on the consent agenda. So I don't know if we need to remove it from the consent agenda or we'll just allow public comments during that period before we do a final motion on the consent agenda. Is that okay, or do you want to amend the agenda to?
No, that's fine.
Okay. But those of you who want to speak on that, I've got your slips and I know that you want to speak on that. So the first item on our agenda is the calling to order, and now we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is the roll call of attendees.
Mayor Barnett,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Bulaware,
Here.
Council Members Bridges, I will note is absent.
He has a family emergency, so he started out here and then he had to leave.
Council Member Knoll. Here. Massey,
Present.
Newland,
Here.
and Strickfaden.
Here.
Thank you.
Next is the approval of the regular session meeting agenda. I believe there is an amendment. Yes.
Yes, Mayor. I would like to approve the agenda for August 9 for our city council meeting with amendment, which being 19, I'd like to add 19A, which would be a closed session for purposes of discussing a written confidential and privileged attorney-client letter with the city attorney.
Work.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, moved by Councilmember Knoll, seconded by Councilmember Massey. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
A regular vote.
Regular vote. Oh, yeah, it doesn't say roll. Yeah, thank you. So used to being online. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so the agenda has been approved as amended. Next is a proclamation recognizing critical assistance from mutual aid partners. Dr. Massey, would you like to read that for us?
Certainly.
And we have Brian Pickworth, who's here to receive it.
This is a proclamation recognizing mutual aid partners, recognizing critical assistance during our recent severe storms in August 2021. Whereas the city of Farmington Hills experienced several storms with heavy rainfall and damaging winds in July 2021, resulting in widespread power outages and an extensive number of downed trees that blocked roadways and prevented access to homes. Whereas several communities in the Metro Detroit area, including Clawson, Huntington Woods, Livonia, Madison Heights, Oak Park, Orchard Lake Village, and West Bloomfield Township, offered critical assistance during this disaster. And whereas by offering vital mutual aid and providing additional equipment, personnel, and supplies, these partners helped ease the burden on workers from the city's Division of Public Works and greatly enhanced our ability to serve the needs of residents and businesses following the storms. And whereas we are grateful for the resources, the time, the knowledge, and the expertise that was made available as all agencies work together in a spirit of cooperation to restore the city's infrastructure as quickly and safely as possible under difficult circumstances. And whereas this experience demonstrates the great importance of the vast mutual aid network in place across our country and throughout our state as we face possible similar emergency events in the future, now, therefore, be it resolved that Vicki Barnett, the mayor of the city of Farmington Hills, on behalf of the City Council, does hereby encourage our residents to recognize these dedicated mutual aid partners and express gratitude for their commitment to helping our community in the devastating aftermath of recent severe storms.
Thank you. And Mr. Pickworth, thank you so much for all your work during this very difficult time. So A lot of tree branches and.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. I'd like to just say thank you to the city council for all the support over the years. The equipment, everything really came in handy, and we've been using it a lot. On behalf of Kevin and Karen, my bosses, from the whole DPW team, from the mechanics to the front office staff, we've been crazily inundated the last 5 weeks. I'd just like to mention real quick too, our contractors really came through. Waste Management, Ellsworth, Shepherd's Tree Service, LaFontaine, a subcontractor, D'Angelo's C&T Tree Service, and like Ken mentioned, our mutual aid partners since 1987, including the city of Livonia. Again, thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And-
Thank
and
you.
Thank you for going the extra miles, and picking up extra branches from people's front lawns. And that was extraordinary, and we were glad to have you do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a proclamation for National Vaccination Month. And I will ask our resident nurse to, Mary Ellen Newland, to read.
Proclamation National Immunization Awareness Month is August 2021. Whereas National Immunization Awareness Month is held each August to highlight the importance of vaccinations and to raise awareness about how vaccines prevent serious and sometimes deadly diseases. And whereas each of us has the power to protect ourselves and others against vaccine-preventable diseases, including the recent COVID-19 pandemic, where even healthy adults became seriously ill and passed the illness on to others with sometimes devastating results. And whereas vaccines are safe and effective, and vaccines-preventable diseases are still a threat to the health and safety of the people across our nation, from babies to the elderly. And whereas getting vaccinated according to the routine childhood immunization schedule is one of the most important things a parent can do to protect the child's health, and is the best way to keep them from getting serious illness diseases, including tetanus, diphtheria, and whooping cough. And whereas it is highly recommended that everyone 6 months of age and older get the flu vaccine every season. Whereas those who are more vulnerable to serious flu illnesses, including babies and young children, older people, and people with certain chronic health conditions. And whereas everyone should speak with their family physician and plan for the administration of appropriate vaccinations throughout their lifetime to ensure long-term health and safety. Now therefore, it be resolved that Vicki Barnett, Mayor of the City of Farmington Hills, on behalf of City Council, do hereby encourage residents to recognize and acknowledge National Immunization Awareness Month and take action to ensure the health and safety of all members of their family and the whole community.
Thank you, and we will be sending this on to the Oakland County Health Department. So thank you very much for reading that. Next item on the agenda is correspondence. Does anybody have any correspondence? Yes, Ms.
Yes.
Boulware.
I received correspondence from several individuals who live in the Timbercrest subdivision regarding the repaving of the Morning View Road that's off of Middle Belt. And they were somewhat surprised because there was no notice that that was going to occur. So many of them were unable to get out of their homes and leave their driveways. They were sort of stuck for a long time in the morning there. I did send those complaints to our city manager, Gary Metchin. He provided a nice apology in which I forwarded on to those residents. And one of the things that he had mentioned is that that would not occur again. So tonight I'd like to ask specifically what process has been put in place so that advance notice will be given when a street is being repaved.
Well, that's a good question, Councilwoman Boulware. So in this particular instance, this was a what we call a mill and fill project. It was really an in and out project. I don't think we were there for more than a day. Karen is in the audience, but she can elaborate. So on those types of projects, what should have happened is we should have put door hangers on all the affected properties 48 hours in advance, letting them know. It's difficult with the weather we've had, whether or not they're actually going to be able to do the work, but certainly try to give them at least 24 hours notice that, hey, we're going to be doing work in your neighborhood. There's going to be a potential conflict if you need to get out of your driveway at different times of the day during that process. And we just failed. We failed to do that. It was an oversight within the department. We've got, well, I can go on. I could explain in much deeper detail, but I don't think we need to do that. So I've had a conversation with Karen, had a conversation with our engineering division, and we will take care of the situation in the future. Yep.
But what are we doing to make certain that that doesn't happen again? Is there a checklist or some process that
There is a checklist.
advance notice is going to be given?
Yes,
To
there-
those residents who may be impacted by the
Yes.
street repaving?
Yes. And during, in larger subdivisions or larger projects where we're actually tearing the road out, in this instance, it wasn't that invasive. We have listservs for each one of those communities to participate in and sign up for. Anybody that's listening or in the crowd tonight, if they want to join those listservs to get up to the date information, you can do that through the city's website. Or if you have questions, you can call the city manager's office to be placed on that listserv. But for the mill and fill projects, we don't do that. It's really on the inspectors, the city inspectors, to let the neighbors know that they're going to be impacted the next day, because it's literally that fast. They're in, they mill the surface, they tack it, and they roll it, and they're out. So, hope that answers your question.
Well, is there going to be some type of checklist or something to, I know that was a mistake.
Yes.
Okay. I know the normal process is to give notice 48 to 24 hours. We did not, for whatever reason. And I guess the question I'm asking is, what process have we implemented, or do we need to make certain that that does not happen again?
We have a process. The process wasn't followed. I guess that's what I'm trying to communicate. Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Mecton, would it also be possible to post a temporary sign that says on such and such a date, city crews will be through this area to do routine road maintenance that may include patching and milling and refilling?
We can certainly do that, sure.
Because I know we have temporary signs we could put up.
Yes.
And just give people an extra 2 days' notice. As they drive down their street and see the sign, they'll know.
Typically, we have, on the larger projects, we actually have signs like that, taxpayer
give
dollars at
warning.
work.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
for
And
sure.
in this case, there's only 2 entranceways, so when one of the entranceways is blocked and there's only one left, it creates a lot of frustration on individuals trying to get out of the subway, early in the subway.
I gathered that from the emails, yeah. And again, our apologies to
Trying
those
get out the
residents.
subdivision early in the morning,
When you're late for work and you can't get out of your driveway, there's a problem, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can't wait till 11 Mile Road between Middle Belt and Inkster is
Yeah.
completed. It's a long way home for me. Anybody else have any correspondence? I did receive 2 items of correspondence that I want to share. One was from Sylvia and Les Charbonneau, and they live in the Pines subdivision, which is it's north of 10 Mile Road, between Middle Belt and Orchard Lake, and there's a drainage issue with the drainage pond in that subdivision, and we've passed that on to our city staff to take a look at that, and it's also got all kinds of pictures, and I think when I mentioned it, Mr. Mecton said that the city is well aware of the situation, and we're working to address it. But this is a larger problem. Many of our homeowners live on creeks, and those creeks they are our drainage system. They are a stormwater drainage system. And we'll be looking at ways with some study sessions coming up as to how to address cleaning those out. And for our riparian homeowners, you need to understand that those are still on your private property. So while there may be a stormwater easement there, we can't just walk onto your property and start fixing things and moving things around. So we'll be addressing that in the future in a more broad way so that everybody who lives along those drainage courses knows it's their responsibility to keep them cleaned out so that we can mitigate flooding in the future. The other item I received was, happens to do with something that is on the agenda tonight. It was just a question email from Leanne Bigos on Scott Drive, and she was concerned about one of the items that is on the agenda for, she thought it was for training purposes, hiring somebody to do training for us, and it's really a contract for our Human Resources Department. So I let her know what that was about, and that's the contract for the diversity and inclusion study that we'll be doing. It's not for training. So I just wanted to make that clear because that will be coming up in a few minutes. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which is where we are now. I know there are several of you who sent up request to speak on item 11, which is on the consent agenda, and that's the deer management plan. So we passed the consent agenda in one motion, and we normally don't remove it from the agenda and place it as a separate item, but I will allow public speaking and comments to come up and talk about that particular issue because I know that there's some people here that want to speak about the deer management program that we're looking at. And we will be having a study session on the deer management process that we're going to go through to look at making this a more regional approach on the 21st of September. Is that when we're doing a study session?
It's actually a public education meeting.
Public education meeting.
Right, it's not a study session, so it's a public ed meeting September 21st at the Hawk.
Okay.
That we will be holding, and we're hoping to get folks from the DNR.
DNR.
Right, Joe? Yes. There to help facilitate the meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So, yes, Mr. Joppick.
There is a process if council would like to so follow, if there is a number of people that are going to speak. I know once in a while there's one or two people, but if there are quite a few, there is a process on your agenda to remove, if council would so like, it may remove an item from the consent agenda and add it right below it where it says consent agenda items for discussion. That way you can take care of your consent agenda item and then handle this after, if you would like.
But I don't want them to have to wait for the entire meeting to go through before they can say. So we'll just, if you don't mind, indulge us in a little bit of informality. And when we read items on the consent agenda, I'll then call you all up to speak on it if that's your pleasure. Okay? Otherwise, they'd have to sit through a long meeting. And I don't want to necessarily make them do that. So, Ms. Boulware, our Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, before I start, I'd like to remove one of these items from the consent agenda. It's item number 15, recommend approval of extension of agreement for diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting with Life's Journey Training, which is CMR 8-21-80,
Okay.
for discussion.
Okay. So it's been moved to change item number 15 and separate that out to item 18A? Or do we just leave it with the same number? Mr. Joppick?
The area to put consent agenda items that are removed is right after the consent. It's right. It's the very next item on your agenda.
Oh,
Yep.
Okay.
okay.
I'm sorry if I didn't
There it
make that
is.
clear.
Thank you.
So we want
Do you all want to move 11 too?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to remove number 11, recommend adoption of a resolution seeking the establishment of a regional urban deer management plan for Oakland County, which is CMR 8-21-78.
Okay, so we're moving items, it's been moved that we move items 11 and 15 to consent agenda items for discussion. Is there a second?
Support.
There is a second, okay. All in favor of, is this a roll call vote?
No,
Can just
Okay.
be.
the consent.
All in favor of moving items 11 and 15, removing them from the consent agenda and putting them on the regular agenda following the consent agenda item, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so it passes 5-1. And that means that item number 11 and item number 15 will follow our consent agenda discussion and motion. Okay.
All right, the consent agenda items for this evening. Number 12, recommended authorization for the city clerk to make a typo correction to the resolution adopted by City Council on July 26, 2021, authorizing ballot language for the November 2nd, 2021 ballot. Item number 13, recommended approval of a permit to be issued to Gen X Pyrotechnics to hold a fireworks display at Franklin Hills Country Club on August 21st, 2021. Item number 14, recommended approval of purchase of 2 Freightliner truck chassis with Wolverine Freightliner East side in the amount of $212,838. 2 tandem axle live bottom dump trucks and 3 CYD dump trucks hoof loader equipment with truck and trailer specialties for an amount not to exceed $423,500, and an F-550 truck chassis with signature Ford in the amount of $42,196. And that's CMR 8-21-79. Number 16, acknowledgement of fiscal year 2020/21, fourth quarter financial summary report. Number 17, recommended approval of the City Council study session meeting minutes of July 26, 2021. And number 18, recommended approval of the City Council regular session minute meetings of July 26, 2021.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Bolaware, supported by Councilmember Knoll, that we move the consent agenda as read. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Strickfaden,
Yes.
Newland,
Yes.
Bolaware,
Yes.
Knoll,
Yes.
Massey,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes. And that brings us to item number 11, which is a consent agenda item that has been removed, and that item is recommended adoption of a resolution seeking the establishment of a regional urban deer management plan for Oakland County, CMR 8-21-78. And I have several people that want to speak. So if you want to come forward, I have Thomas Proger. Did I say that right or wrong? Yes, you did. Okay, good.
Hello, thank you for your service, and I am in agreement with the establishment of the Regional Urban Deer Management Plan. But I am here today because I saw last month's presentation regarding the deer, and I just thought it was so full of anecdotal evidence saying that we have a big problem, even though the commission said their purpose was to just collect data. I feel many exaggerated statements were made in the presentation, such as chronic wasting disease, which can be a future major concern. And the truth is, it's not a concern today, it's not a problem today, but anything can be a future major concern. So I just think that kind of created a little fear in people. He discussed about a deer attack that really wasn't a deer attack, but that we all should be concerned about deer attacks, like it was a grizzly bear or something, which was really not the case. He mentioned that residents have actually given up on their yards, and I don't know anyone who has given up on their yard. I mean, I'm a long-term resident of Farmington Hills. I live in a subdivision, and I mean, I agree, I see more deer, I'm going to be honest about it, but to say a statement like people have given up on their yards, maybe 1 or 2, maybe 100, but there's 81,000 people that live in this city. So I don't know if it's a major concern or not. And then lastly, it was not uncommon to see 14 deer in your backyard. So that means out of the 81,000 residents, half or more have seen 14 deer in their backyard. And I just feel like things like that just are going to give people bad information and it lead to bad decisions. Once again, the 300 complaints out of the 81,000 residents is really 0.002% of the population. I do want to state, and this is just my opinion, but backed by a lot of evidence throughout when I jog, when I walk, when I drive. Over the last 5 years, it's true that soaring land prices, a lot of fields and forested areas have been developed. Now houses are taking over a lot of the places where deer were living. The deer have been squeezed into smaller and smaller spaces. And then we're kind of blaming the deer for this. So I just wish the presentation had a little bit more discussion about enforcing the no deer feeding and actually giving out tickets for feeding the deer, education regarding distracting driving and times of day when there's more likely to be deer crossing, road signage and heavily crossing areas, education about gardens and landscape. I mean, my boxwoods, my tiger lilies, nothing's been damaged in 5 years. Also, I have a garden, and yeah, deer do get a little bit of it, but we protect it mostly. And then lastly, I hope they will look into possibly sterilization if it came to that. That seemed to be dismissed a little bit. So those are just some of my thoughts. And lastly, they did talk about the Ann Arbor, what they did in Ann Arbor for a little bit, but MLive reports the number of incidents averaged 62 deer accidents in the last 5 years. The 5 years before the call, it was 41 deer accidents. And the reason that Wide Open Spaces magazine gave was when you start shooting the deer, they start scattering. So just something to consider. And then lastly, I was surprised to see this. The deer management related expenses for the year in Ann Arbor were $140,000 per year. And that's why they decided to cancel the call for the final year, because they wanted to remove it from a budget. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. The next person is Kimberly Corona.
Hello, I'm Kimberly Corona, a constituent in Farmington Hills. I first want to thank all of you for your service. I also wanted to thank you for moving this up to content for discussion so that we could discuss it sooner. I also wanted to discuss on the deer. I saw the study session that was live streamed. I appreciate all of you live streaming that. I recognize that because residents have brought this issue up, it is now being addressed. And I understand that there's interest and a need for having the consortium with the local cities, because deer do not know that there are city boundaries. They're just living here. But what I do hope is that when discussions come, that non-lethal measures are taken into very serious consideration if deer management is decided it must be taken. I think a lot of times people automatically go to a cull because that's the only thing that they know. But because humans have caused habitat destruction, we're the ones that have led to deer not having as much space. I think that we have a huge responsibility to think about how we can do peaceful coexistence with wildlife. And I take this view not just when it comes to wildlife, but in any problem that we have. I think violence should be the last resort. I think that it's representative of how we think about the world and trying to figure out what are peaceful solutions that we have to coexist in this world. Whether it's deer, our interactions with other people, whatever it is, we have to find peaceful resolutions to problems and to conflicts. And I think as someone who teaches children, I think when our cities do that, we're giving them a good model of saying we can find peaceful solutions. I wanted to say that during the study session, I really appreciated the city council member who said that there are new technologies that are non-lethal, and that there are many residents, while they said that they wanted management, they did not want lethal measures to be used if at all possible. So I really appreciate that that was brought up. I know that it's new, that we would have to get special permits, but as the one council member said, if we go to the Department of Natural Resources, they will say that our city is responsible for funding the problem and for addressing it. So if we're responsible for it, we should be able to say we want special permission to try infertility. And I think this is a new technology that causes low harm to the deer. They won't be able to reproduce fawns for 2 years, and that will help to reduce the population. And if the main issue that people have is that the deer population is too large and it's causing problems, and the main counter to that is that we don't want to kill them, then solutions like infertility would solve both problems. It would help to control the population without having to cause harm, and so you have a win-win solution. And I think that's what we always try to achieve, is a win-win solution. Now, while we reduce the population, there's still the short term of some of the other issues that people have with their gardens and landscaping. And on the Ann Arbor government website, they have a very good website about deer-resistant gardening and non-lethal deer deterrence. So I think that we can do a lot of education. I know there's an education session planned on the September 21st, and I hope that some of these things are included. Now, I know another concern is deer-car collisions. In Rochester Hills, I know that when they were considering the cull, many of the residents were very concerned about it. They were very organized, and they said, we can reduce these collisions in other ways that are low cost. And they did educational brochures, which I know sounds very, very small and simple, but it really did work, because a lot of times when people see deer, they panic and they don't know what to do. So they educated the whole community. They said it was very low cost to create these brochures and send them out, and it helped to reduce the collisions. They also had electronic signage for the speed limit during dawn and dusk in the areas where the deer were most known to pass. Because just regular deer signs can often be missed. You see it over and over again, you don't notice it. So they had these electronic signs that would stand out, and that also helped to reduce it. So I think there's a lot of measures that we could look into. I'm sure when this coalition forms, they were planning to do that. I just wanted to, as a constituent, voice my opinion and my support for really focusing on non-lethal methods as much as possible. So again, thank you for your time and allowing me to speak today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it was Dr. Massey who was noticing the new birth control techniques for the does, so that we can hopefully avoid the other.
Well, yeah, we don't need to go into the
Yes, thank you.
into the science right now, but yes, there's things out there that one would hope we can consider.
And we can also tag them, which would give us much better ability to do deer management in the
Good point.
future. There's also Jasmine Roseman wanted to speak on whitetail in the suburbs, and I know that this is, he said public question and comments, but I believe you want to come up now, so we would love to hear from you.
I don't quite look like a Jasmine.
No, you don't. You look more like the professor.
So Jasmine
The two of you, yes.
Yeah, Jasmine is my daughter, and this is an essay from her English class last year. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from that, if that's okay. And before that, of
Well,
course,
before that, Jasmine, I'm gonna have the city make copies of this and distribute it to all council members for later as well. So thank you.
And thank you all for your service. So I'll start here. It says, you may think that it is extremely dangerous to hunt in residential areas, and of course it is to a certain extent. But consider this. Hunters in Michigan are required to take hunter safety course. Michigan already has regulations and restrictions about hunting too close to occupied dwellings, or in the case of a suburban city like Farmington Hills, houses, buildings, etc. Michigan hunters and or their apprentices should be aware of such restrictions. They should also have safe practices related to hunting in general, including bow hunting. Assuming hunters would recklessly endanger pets and people if allowed to hunt in suburban areas like Farmington Hills is not entirely rational or fair to many responsible, experienced, and conscientious Michigan sportsmen. It may, however, be reasonable to raise the bar a bit for those who should be given the privilege to hunt deer with bow and arrow in a suburban area like Farmington Hills. For example, in Iowa, where there has been a successful urban deer hunting program where there are strict distance guidelines to maintain safety and privacy of neighboring properties. Additionally, hunters' shooting skills is verified annually with a Proctor bow shooting test. Hunters also are urged to only take high percentage shots from close range. Hunters are also advised not to take shots towards property lines, buildings, etc. And this demonstrates that this is a thorough process for being able to hunt in this way. This online article expresses statistical evidence and data that should support my argument against the inability to hunt on private land or residential property in the suburbs of Michigan, especially Farmington Hills. For example, Jason Andrews says, urban deer hunting is a management practice used in many cities and suburban areas across the United States, which clearly states that some people don't find it disturbing to thin down herds in their city and suburban areas. You could say they feel it is a way of maintaining balance between the deer and the communities they have adapted into. An argument that might be brought against my belief is that someone may trespass on my property to retrieve a deer. Technically, people trespass on property quite often. For example, random sales calls, seeking donations or volunteers, dog walkers, etc. And the sensationalism of the idea in general that a wounded deer would be roaming around the suburbs in search of a meddlesome person who would, of course, make all kinds of trouble for everyone is, I believe, a bit far-fetched. In states like Connecticut, they appreciate people who desire to bow hunt deer in suburban residential property. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, car versus deer accidents is a major concern for many of its residents. Thanks to an urban deer hunting program established 10 years ago, such accidents have been reduced by 47%. Speaking of Connecticut, there was a reality show filmed there called Chasing Tail, which followed the hunting adventures of urban bow hunters. Chasing Tail is, I believe, a vivid and entertaining look at how such an urban deer hunting program works. So I'll leave it there. There's a little bit more to the essay. Again, it's been submitted to council. I personally, my interest in the deer would be more like in the context of a natural resource, in as much as it is for the rest of the state of Michigan. I appreciate venison as in a culinary interest, and I've been a hunter since I was 11 years old. That's where Jasmine gets a lot of the material for this particular essay. Preliminarily, I haven't seen any plan or what is potentially proposed, but I would throw out some preliminary recommendations, like I would restrict, I know this is very early, but I would restrict it to elevated stands. That helps to ensure that the projectile is terminating very fast to the ground. If you were allowed to shoot, for instance, with a crossbow on the ground, that projectile could travel 300 yards. But if you're in a tree and you're hunting from elevation, it should terminate in pretty close proximity to the hunter. So these are ideas that are not as relevant to hunting elsewhere in Michigan, but in a suburban area, I think those would be, that's something I would suggest. And another thing for non-hunters, maybe to think about, even the best shot, a deer can travel minimum 20, maybe 300 yards, even with almost an arrow through his heart. They just extremely robust. So there's going to be the chance that it's going to run on someone else's property. There's no way to terminate a deer right there and ensure he won't, you know, someone won't have a gory situation. But, so, just a few things to think about.
We really appreciate you coming forward, and Jasmine, thank you so much. I looked at you've got all kinds of supporting documents in here, brings me back to my school days, and I don't know what grade you got on the paper, but it looks pretty good to me, so thank you. We're not proposing anything yet other than education and seeing where the rest of the county and DNR and conservation programs go, so we'll keep you all posted, so thank you for coming forward. I don't know if anybody else wanted to speak on the deer question. There are two other people that want to speak during public questions and comments. If it's about the deer or anything on this consent agenda, please feel free to speak. If not, we'll call on you during public questions and comments. Okay. Now, do we vote on these separately, these items?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
They would be
Not a
handled
roll call
separately.
vote.
So this is item number 11, and we've heard some discussion from the residents on deer. This program that we are looking at here is to do research and to come up with a more cohesive approach, countywide, more regional, but there's no methods here that are being determined at all. It's more for coming up with some way to approach it and bringing all these other folks in to help guide us on a regional basis. So is there a motion to recommend adoption of the resolution? Yes, Ms. Bowler?
Yes, I recommend that we adopt the resolution seeking the establishment of a regional urban deer management plan for Oakland County, and that's CMR 8-21-78.
Support. It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Bolaware, seconded by Councilmember Knoll. Is there any further discussion from council? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Regular vote.
Regular
Since we
vote?
removed
Mayor.
it from the consent.
Regular vote?
Regular vote.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, it passes 6-0. Next item is item number 15, recommended approval of extension of agreement for diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting with Life's Journey Training and Consulting in collaboration with Essence Learning, LLC, not to exceed $65,000 per year with possible extensions, CMR 8-21-80. Ms. Bolaware, you wanted to?
Yes, yes. I have, when we last spoke about this issue, we talked about hiring a consulting firm to bring back to council information on what we need to look for in a diversity officer or position, because council had approved that position in our budgetary meeting earlier this year. So for this, I'd like to ask, here we're asking for an extension of an agreement, but I have not seen, or have they started, the process to come back to tell us what we should look for in hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for staffing.
Okay, well, it's a good question. I just took a look at the reviewing some of the minutes, and there's an awful lot of discussion that took place at our goal session meeting, and the information that was provided at that meeting and subsequent discussions with City Council and at the budget meeting, you are right. We budgeted for a position for an assistant to the city manager, so that in the event that if once we go through the strategic planning and the consulting effort, if council felt that it was necessary to bring an additional person on board, then that information would certainly be provided to City Council at that time. Look, there's nothing mutually exclusive to both processes, and if council wants to hire an individual at this point, that's certainly council's prerogative. My recommendation would be to go through this process, which is what I believe I originally expressed during the budget discussion, and do an evaluation of our organization. And quite candidly, this consultant is an extreme. Both ladies are extremely impressive individuals. They have an incredible amount of professional experience. And, you know, John's going to probably jump on here too. This is a journey. This hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion person at this stage in the game, we can certainly do that. But this is a journey, and this is an organizational effort, much like the sustainability effort was back in the early aught years, of working with staff to incorporate this as part of our organizational culture and to work with staff. And ultimately, the goal here is that we would come back to council with, there might be many options that we come back to council with. One of them may be to hire a DEI person. Another option may be to provide additional resources in the Human Resources Department and allow our Human Resources Director to lead that. There's a multitude of options. So
I understand that. I understand that portion. But at some point when we discuss this, you know, this is a multi-year contract that we're looking at, which they're going to do a variety of processes. And the two individuals, you're right, they're almost their best in their class for what they're doing. But I would think that at this juncture, we would hire a diversity, equity, inclusion officer to have that person, whoever we decide to hire, work with this consulting firm so that at least there's some continuity and that person's ideas, because they already have some expertise themselves. It seems like now, to me, we're just pushing it out with no end game other than study, or make recommendations. And they can recommend, but they can't, you know, implement.
Yep.
And I would hope that before this year is out, that we would have somebody on our staff that would have that position. That's my personal.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
This particular process, as we walk through the process, as we walk through the journey, there are actionable things that staff and this organization, including City Council, need to participate in. This is a very open, very transparent, very strategic process. And while there are 3 phases to this, we could make a decision to hire, council could make a decision to hire anybody at any time. Okay? They are not mutually exclusive. We are throwing every resource that we have at this effort that is budgeted at this time. The other thing that I might add is, you know, Mr. Randall and I have had many discussions on this. And this is something that is very important to me. I think it's critical for this organization to go through this process, in large part because not only are the demographics of this community changing, we need to build upon the characteristics of this community, which has always been an inclusive and welcoming community. And anything that we can do to make ourselves better, then that's what we need to do. And this is all part of that process. If council feels that hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion person right now at this point in time, then we will certainly work within the confines of that. But the information that the consultants gave us, even during the process, I think what the lady said was, they're not mutually exclusive. Council can do whatever, you know, you decide to do. I think as your city manager, I would prefer to at least go through phase 1 and do the process that they have recommended, which I think is extremely comprehensive, and have an opportunity to bring that back and discuss the executive summary and the outcomes of Phase 1 with City Council.
When is phase, what's the time period for Phase 1? Do we
Well,
have a time period?
you can-
Once a contract is signed, whether it's for Phase 1 or multiple years, what is the timeline for Phase 1?
The timeline is as fast as we can schedule the consultant's time to meet with staff and go through that process. There is, unfortunately, I'm getting this perception that staff or myself are trying to slow walk this, and nothing could be further from the truth. We have done our due diligence. We have looked at human resources consultants. This is a highly specialized field, and it's highly specialized, especially in the last 2 to 3 years. There's a large demand on these particular professionals, and the human resources consultants that we spoke to, none of them have the in-house resources. And we were fortunate enough to find these folks, in large part to John Randall's effort and to Kelly Monaco's effort in our on our staff, that found that Sterling Heights was using these folks to help them through their efforts as well. They're following the same process that we're hopefully going to follow.
Well, it's my position that we need to hire a DEI person sooner rather than later, and they can work with these individuals over a period of time. But I'd like to see someone on city staff who's the champion of this entire effort.
Well, I think you're looking at him, and I think everybody, all of our department heads are supportive of this effort. And really, at the end of the day, Councilwoman Boulware, every one of our department heads and every staff person in this organization needs to be a champion for that, without a doubt.
Well, I like
And that's not just paying lip service. This is a cultural shift. Not even a cultural shift, a cultural augmentation. Shift sounds like we're deficient somewhere. And if we are, this consultant will find it, will fix it, and we'll move on.
Anyone else?
Need a motion?
We could have a motion.
Unless there's still discussion. I
Well,
see a
we
hand up
could
over
we could
there.
discuss it with the motion on the floor. In fact, we should probably have a motion and a second before we continue to discuss it.
Not sure if he has a motion or a hand up.
No, go ahead. I don't have a
Go
motion
ahead.
yet.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion.
Their motion?
I'll make a motion. And that motion would be that we approve recommend approval of extension of agreement for diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting with Life's Journey Training and Consulting in collaboration with Essence Learning LLC, not to exceed $65,000 per year with possible extensions. And I make that motion given that we've had a lot of discussion on this, and actually it was part of a larger HR discussion and agreement that we were going to be evaluating a number of other positions within our community. So I think this is consistent with what is consistent with what we have been doing. I think that it's been articulated that this is we are learning with the buy-in that we have from all the city staff and so forth. I think we need to continue to learn from this, and this is part of an extension of what we've already been doing. So that's the reason I make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by Councilmember Knoll. Is there further discussion? Yes.
Thank you. Do you see any benefit personally with hiring a DEI director now? And if the answer is yes, what would those benefits be? And are you looking in-house for any potential candidates?
Wait, put me on the spot there, didn't you? Mayor, if I may.
Yes, you may.
If you just hire somebody to come into this organization and anoint them the DEI person, without doing the work of getting into each of the departments, building the consensus, working with our human resources department, giving especially our human resources guidance on the diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. At this point, strategically, it would not be a good decision in my mind to hire somebody. Again, it's council's decision. I think we need to learn as an organization what this is, how do we do it, how long does it take. And I will be very candid with you. The consultants were very open with us. This is not something that you can just throw a switch and all of a sudden we will have all these DEI policies implemented. That's not how this works. This is a long-term organizational effort that needs to be done the correct way. And I think I heard somebody say it earlier in the meeting. We can do it quick, or we can do it correctly. And I believe we're moving forward on the correct path. You may not disagree, or you may disagree, but that's my opinion. Everything that I know from a strategic planning perspective, everything that I know from the relationships that I have in this organization tell me that this is the right path to go. Let's look at the organization. Let's build a strategic plan. Let's get our staff in the right involved with the process. Let's get human resources to do what they need to do. And then again, there are actionable measures at each step of the way through this proposal. And we will be reporting back to council on this as we move through this process. And with discussions with my human resources director and my assistant city manager and with council, we will bring recommendations. We will have conversations. This is not, I don't want people to think that this is, well, we're just putting this off for 3 years. That's not the intent. That's not the process here. The process is strategically, let's move through this. Let's spend taxpayer dollars wisely. Let's make good, well-informed decisions.
And my second part of that question was, have you and or will you consider qualified internal candidates for the position?
I think based on the information that is provided, I think we will have options from an administrative perspective of how we continue to move through our process and to sustain that process. And there may very well be an opportunity to reorganize the Human Resources Department and provide additional resources there that may ultimately free up our Human Resources Director to help direct this whole effort. And, you know, at the end of the day, every department head, every employee in this organization has to be the champion. They have to understand and they have to know that that's part of our fabric. It's part of our culture.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
So this is an extension of what they've already been doing. So how many hours have they already put into evaluation? How much money have we already spent to them already? And is council could be provided with what they have found, what they have determined so far?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilwoman Newland, the answer is we haven't spent any money with them at all. The contract is before you this evening to authorize us to go ahead and sign that contract. And once we do that, then we will have our kickoff meeting and start moving through the process.
What's before us is to hire the consultants, yes or no. They haven't been hired yet, so they haven't done any work for us yet. But I believe Kelly Monaco has gone out to bid, and that we've we've solicited input, and this is the company that you've looked at and you recommend that we hire, which is why this contract is before us today. Any expenditure in the city over $10,000 that's not on the budget already, we have to approve. And so that's why this is coming to us. That was one of the questions that somebody did ask me.
So, Madam Mayor, if I may, just to clarify, I think I mentioned, we did, our hopes were that the human resources consultants that we brought on board a few meetings ago would have these types of services as part of their scope. It was part of the scope of the proposal. The unfortunate thing is that none of them really had the expertise in-house, which is what we were looking for. So they were just going to sub it out anyways with an increased fee because they've got markups and they got to run it through their books and all kinds of stuff like that. So what you have before you in the administrative summary is really an opportunity for us to leverage another community signing a contract with these folks and our ability to, and the contractor's willingness to extend their municipal pricing that Sterling Heights had signed. So we're essentially, we call it piggybacking. So another city council has already vetted this particular organization. We've done our due diligence. We feel very comfortable with these ladies, and we believe that they can do a fine job. So we're just essentially piggybacking onto Sterling Heights' contract.
Okay? Anyone else? I would like to say something. I don't know if Mr. Randall, our Human Resources Director, wants to address this. This is a complicated program that we want to put in because it's not just simply a race issue. It's a total inclusion, welcoming program that we're trying to create up and down the employment chain, as well as community outreach for residents to move into our community, to make them feel comfortable, and for businesses to support our business population and to move into opportunities for minority businesses to feel comfortable moving into our city and seeing what grants and other programs are out there. However, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Bolawar that I don't want to slow this down to the point that we keep kicking the can down the road. We started with this discussion well before it even began as a goal-setting item, and it was brought up over a year ago. And for many of us, this is the heart of what we want to see done in our community. We are the most diverse city in Oakland County. We take pride in that diversity, and we're not just diverse in terms of race, gender, religion, but in terms of ability. And some people have physical or emotional challenges that need to be addressed, and we want to make sure that our autistic kids feel comfortable at playgrounds and throughout our community. And we've talked about making sure that we fix some of the problems at the Hawk in terms of handicap accessibility. So this is a broad program, and I don't want to have to go through 2 years of another study before we look at filling a position that we've already budgeted for. And I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I really would like to see us move on this before the end of 2021. I think it's critical. We've worked with the beloved community, and we've worked with our police officers and our fire department, and everybody so far seems to be on board with the concept. It's now just getting down to the point where we fill the job. So the first thing I would like to see, if we're going to go ahead and do this hiring, is that we address those issues quickly and thoroughly and bring council in on the loop and make sure that we're not postponing the inevitable anymore. I think that the residents of this community deserve an inclusion and diversity staff person to address those issues both internally and externally. If you are someone who is deaf and we're going to have, or blind, and we have electric cars, and you can't hear them, how are we going to make sure that we provide for proper signaling for people to make sure that they're not injured when they cross our crosswalks? There's a lot of things that we need to address here, and I don't want to keep postponing it. So that is my only caveat. I am in support of hiring these two consultants, but I'm not in favor of postponing the issue to drag it out and not get ahead with hiring. So that's just my comment, and I feel very strongly about this, and I know that we have some council members that feel very strongly about this as well. It's for the health and welfare of our community as a whole. Anybody else have any more comments before we vote?
No, I think you've adequately, said much more eloquent than I did.
It's not more eloquent, but
yes, you were. That, I just feel like, that we're just kicking the can down the road.
I wanted very clear on the record
Yes.
that some of us do not want to kick the can down the road. We want all available information. We want to make sure that when we hire somebody, it's successful.
And it's just like what we talked about earlier, whether it's about the deer or whether it's about marijuana, we need to do our research first, and that's
Absolutely.
what this is about. So while we're at it, let's vote on this
Yeah.
and let
But I
these
don't-
ladies start doing their job
Yeah.
and start evaluating our organization before we start telling them what they need to do.
Okay.
I just
Well,
don't want to research 3 or 4 years.
I agree with
That's
you.
my thing. Research is great. We should all do our due diligence. But we cannot research this issue for 3 years. We've talked about this in our study session, in our goal session. We've had this conversation for many minutes. And I think that I am not opposed to hiring these individuals, but I am opposed to not hiring before the year is over with, diversity, equity, and inclusion officer.
Unless there's compelling
Well,
information that they bring forward.
Yes, so let's call the vote so we can hire these ladies.
Okay. Are we done talking? Yes? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is public question and comments. So I know that we've got 2 people that want to speak. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Good evening, members of City Council. My name is Lorna Slinky. I live at 28124 Greening Street. And this is in regards to an incident that happened next door at 28134 Greening Street. Mayor Barnett, I believe you were given some paperwork regarding that. This was in regards to a...
Festival.
Oh, yes. That, and Councilman Massey, yes, I was here in 2019 also, and Councilwoman Knoll, yes, which culminated in 5 different police agencies, 4, backing up Farmington Hills. The city of Farmington, Southfield, Novi, and West Bloomfield came to back up Farmington Hills Police. There were over 100 cars parked on Greening Street from 12 Mile to Burbank. There's 12 Mile, Barlow, Burbank, and 13 Mile Road. So people were basically walking a half a mile back to this party that included professional sound equipment and 5 different musical acts. The party was called Soaked, and again, you've got a copy of that invitation. And the reason it was called Soaked was because they have a backyard in-ground pool, so why not use that? This was the 3rd party at that house within 2 weeks. They had one on July the 3rd, they had one on July the 4th, then they had what I call it, the overtop one on July 18th. And what put me over the top, and I explained that to the police officers also, was the fact that they had armed security. I'm sorry, no neighborhood party needs armed security. And And again, there were over 250 people in attendance. Several of the people there, including the two that originally had planned the party and were scheduling it, said it was a birthday party. No, that was not a birthday party. My husband and I know marijuana is legal, but I don't want to smell it. And you could smell it all over, and it was wafting. So I was one of the complainants on the police report. And the reason I'm appearing before council this evening is just plain and simple. The residents of Greening Street are done. We had to put up with this in 2019, as again, Mr. Massey and Ms. Knoll, I appeared back then, and by a miracle, those parties were stopped. 2020 year of COVID, no parties. 2021, the neighbors on the street were just literally sitting there waiting for it to happen, and it did. So the reason I'm appearing before council this evening is to ask, I don't know what ordinance the city has against this, but again, it was $25 per person to get in. There has to be something on the city regulations that can prohibit that from happening. And again, no party I know of in a residential neighborhood needs armed security to get in. The homeowners were ticketed for noise ordinance, disturbing the peace and noise ordinance violations for the homeowners. To the residents of Greening, we just sat there and shook our head thinking there has to be something more. So that's why, again, I'm appearing before council this evening to say enough is enough. The residents of Greening Street are asking for the city's help and assistance to make sure that these parties never, not this year, not next year, year after next, ever happen again. This just can't. The residents, plus the garbage, there was trash all up and down the street. We could see open drinking, and there was also alcohol, from what the police had stated in their report, that they witnessed open alcohol going on back there, which means they were getting in their cars, probably driving home, many of them probably under the influence. You were smelling the marijuana, so you knew they were either drinking or smoking marijuana. That's going to create a safety hazard, but that's for another time. But again, the residents of Greening Street are done. We don't want to ever worry about whether or not this is going to happen again. So again, council members, thank you for your time and hearing our concerns. And again, I am one of the main complainants on that police report because I don't want this to happen again. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention to this matter.
Thank you. I'm so sorry you've had to suffer through that. What can we do with this? Yes, Mr. Jopik.
Well, at this point, my understanding is that, in fact, cases have been brought in district court, which is our jurisdiction. We can bring cases in district court for violation of our ordinances, and the city has done that, and those are pending cases in the district court at this time. So in lieu of litigating this in this venue in front of city council, it is in the court at the present time, I believe, and we're also investigating possible other enforcement avenues with respect to those properties.
Okay, so I would suppose if we found underage drinking, we could prosecute that as well?
If there was underage drinking, yes, that could be prosecuted. I don't have the details on that, but there were tickets issued, is my understanding, and it's pending in court.
When you have something this egregious and it's this chronic, a slap on the wrist from a civil infraction is not going to stop it. So.
Well, if I may?
Yes, please.
Actually, hopefully it won't be a slap on the wrist. Hopefully it will be something more than that. Under civil infraction ordinances, we have other methods of enforcement, not just a fine. It can go beyond the fine. In addition to the fine, there can be injunctive relief and things of that nature issued by the district court judges, and we'll be looking for that.
And is there any way we can get back to the residents so that they know what's going on?
Well, the prosecutor on this matter, I'm sure, has their names in the report as witnesses pertaining to this matter, and if there's a trial, they would be called in connection with that. We do have to treat this in the nature of a court case at this point, and I want to be careful that we litigate it in front of the judge where it belongs at this point.
Okay.
And of course, I'm not dissuading you from standing up and speaking. It's your right to talk at a public meeting, and for sure, but I want to be sure that we don't do anything here to affect what happens in
There
the
is a
courthouse.
separation of powers, but we would like to be informed as this proceeds.
Certainly.
Okay, and to the residents, you know how to reach us through our email. Feel free to contact us if you haven't heard anything in 2 months. Let us know, and we will get you an update.
Should I just give
I
it
live
to
on Greening Street as well.
Okay.
One thing I want to make sure, it's, Lorna kept referring to a party. It is clear and it is advertised as a concert, and our neighborhood has been treated as a concert venue. It's not just a party. They've claimed repeatedly that it's a birthday party. They have 2 sons who apparently have birthdays every weekend because it's the same excuse every time. But it's to the point where they actually had a shuttle service bringing people in. And we literally have drugs on our street. We've found edible marijuana on the curb where little kids are walking. Booze bottles everywhere. I cleaned 16 booze bottles out of my yard this year already. All empty and all high end, so they apparently can afford these events. But there is no way that should be continuing. It's been all of 2019 and 3 times this year. What we're asking for is an ordinance that actually would stop commercial enterprises of this nature in a residential neighborhood. Because she has also talked to us, or at least to some of the people on the street, saying, well, they can't stop me, I'm going to do whatever I want. Because they make quite a bit of money off of these events. They are organized concerts in a residential neighborhood in our city. And some of the patrons have been very respectful, very decent people. But a lot of them have been intimidating. I've seen them going to and from their cars getting alcohol and drugs, as well as I've seen guns. I've seen people sitting on a motorcycle on my street selling drugs out of the box on the back of their motorcycle, like they have the built-in carriers. He was sitting there selling drugs right in front of us. I've seen armed security on my street dealing with people coming in and out and making threats, and they intimidated threats to our police officers. That's why they had to call in other departments, because they insinuated that something bad could happen to the police officers if they tried to end the event. If we can't pass an ordinance that would absolutely stop this, I'm really not sure a criminal case is going to make a difference. They don't care. They've made it clear they don't care. So that's why we were here to speak, is to see if there's some kind of an ordinance that can be passed that will give you, as a separate entity from the judicial branch, to have some kind of meat that you can try and enforce them. Because in the past you wrote a letter to cease and desist. It did seem to help at the time, but at the same time their attitude is, we're going to make money. And it's a production company. And I don't think it's anything that just the judicial arm can handle. I think we have to have a multifaceted approach to put a stop to this, because they've made it clear through their actions for the last several years that they don't care what. The police have been there every time for one incident or another. They've spent so much time on our street, I feel like I know them. And it's sad but true. And I just would like to see them have you to have an avenue to help us stop it and not just put the burden on them, because there are limitations to the law. If they don't have any proof that there's tickets being sold, there's nothing they can do. This time they found the evidence online. In 2019, I provided them with some. But there are limitations to what they can do if they don't have evidence of criminal or illegal activity. Whereas you have ordinances that you can pass that could help us keep our neighborhood.
We do have ordinances, and we'll find out through the court if they're robust enough, and if they're not, we'll have to come
My understanding
back.
from the police officer was that it did not prohibit, it didn't apply because it was in a private property. And it was in a residential neighborhood, so the ordinance that applies to entertainment didn't apply to this.
Mr. Joppik?
I'd be happy to talk briefly with the two residents in the hall.
That would be wonderful.
Again, I don't want to litigate the case in here.
Okay, then
if
let's
that's
do that, okay.
Yeah, if the appropriate, though, we would really appreciate a specific ordinance that would spare us any more concerts.
You're free.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's got to be so frustrating. I can't imagine.
Do
And
they need this
scary.
I'll give it to
Yeah, just hand it to Pam for the record. Is there anybody else for public question and comment? Yes.
Good evening. Hope everybody can hear me. This is so devastating for me right now. My name is Pat Gardner Blackwell, and it's my husband Walter Blackwell. We live on Meadowview Drive. We had submitted a letter to the email to the mayors and the council, and because of the flooding that has occurred on our street, and we have another neighbor that's here that's going to speak as well. Our home has flooded from June 25th, July the 5th, July the 7th, and July the 24th. Very devastating because we're retired senior citizens, and with the impact of all that, storm and rain and water just shooting into our home. And trying to, we don't have any children, we don't have anyone that could help us. And we cried out to our city to give us some assistance. We have contacted, we've been to the city hall, we have footage, video footage. We contacted the county. We've finally found out we had an emergency manager. I sent, left messages, emailed, and then finally had a chance to speak with him, and he finally got back with us. I've talked to Brenda Lawrence's office. I reached out to, I was given the Samantha, is it Steckler?
Yes.
Daughter, also as well. We've had our homeowners association to reach off, and we was given different places to call. We've called, so many emails and called, and it seems like no one was reaching back at us to give us any answers or any help or where we can go to get some assistance to get our home back to normal. We can't do anything now until they fix what's going on out there on the street with the flood that occurred. Water, I'm just saying, water was just pouring into our home. And we're running around trying to get it out. I know I'm rambling because I'm just out of it. And with our home, we have a walkout. He has a man cave. That's his place he wants to go. Get away from me.
Which is why it's so frustrating to you, because now you're stuck with him.
I also have a woman cave where I allowed him to rent when his man cave first flooded. I let him use my woman cave, which is next door in my place. And so now neither one of us have a place because we had to pull up all the carpeting. We tore out the band around all the borders and stuff like that. And it's just like, our frustration was calling and asking, no one getting back with us. Now, I would say when my husband went to the city hall, he took a copy of the video for them to see. And the young lady, I don't know the young lady's name, asked him to forward the copy. And this is during the time when the power went out. So you all didn't have power. So she asked to have it emailed to her personal email line. So, and so he did. Then we finally had someone from the engineering department to come out. Well, he was just saying, well, it's your problem, this and that. We was talking about how the water's just overflowing. And it's all started happening when they redid the streets and did those drainage areas. That's when we started that's when all the problems started occurring, but not to the massive that is happening now. So every time it rains, even like
panic.
today, I just get nervous because I don't know if we're gonna have to try to go through again and try to clean and do all the things that we have done. Now, we did get an email from the emergency manager, and he said, we asked, well, what resources are available for us? And I understand that because it's not enough of us to have the problem, that there's no funding for us as well. So we just like sitting ducks, and we just want to, is our city going to be behind us to help us to get through this? Or we just going to have to be sitting ducks? We've only been living out here for 9 years. It's been wonderful until, this massive flood has occurred. And we feel like we just out here alone with not any help. Then our neighbor, he's only been here, I think, 2 years, 3 years. So I think he's flooded at least 3 or 4 times. And like I say, with the footage that's been going, my husband has, I know that we just want everybody to know what is really going on. You don't know what's going on in the neighborhood until somebody speaks up on it. Just like the last young ladies will hear about the party and stuff. So that's.
Well, I know that I did speak with Samantha Steckloff. She happens to be my daughter, so I speak with her kind of regularly. And we had also reached out to Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who represents Farmington, because she was available and we know her well. It's my understanding that while the governor did declare a state of emergency for this area, that does not free up funding for individuals. Right. It just allows us to recoup some of the costs for cleaning up the downed trees and everything else. We do have, yes?
Doesn't it allow an individual, though, then to apply through FEMA? Since we were declared a disaster area through the governor or not?
No, we were declared a state disaster area and not a federal disaster area.
Okay, so then Detroit was declared a federal, but we didn't get that designation.
Right.
Okay, because I know in Detroit they can apply for FEMA funds.
Right, and parts of Livonia can. Is there, I can check back with Congresswoman Stevens and Congresswoman Lawrence, and I don't mind doing that. But if you're referencing, is there something that happened when we redid the roads over there? Or is this still part of that act of God storm and the climate change?
Something happened. What they did was they reduced the size of the water. It's like that before we got there, but the water comes east. It comes from across Drake in a great big old 18-inch cylinder, and it comes across, comes under the street to my house. Then it makes its right turn. Now, when we first moved over there, the water was coming across 3 feet high from in front of our house. You know, you got the valley in there? It was 3 feet high coming across, then going back behind the house, and then going east. We even got to some big old pool out there somewhere. I walked in the other day on the 24th. So what they did when they did the streets is they cut the valve size down from 18 inches down to 12 inches. That's what the problem is. Because now all that water comes from over there now is trying to squeeze into this little 8-inch, 12-inch valve, and it backs up. It backs up over his house before it gets to our house, but it's backed up. The water comes over the street. I got videos if y'all want to see this. It's great. Now it's not 3 feet high no more. It's 3 feet wide, but it can't come out fast enough.
Right,
so it has to back up, and it backs up, comes across the street, comes behind the house. We got all kind of pools over there. I follow this thing all the way down. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Mr. Mekchin, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to the to the Blackwells, we sympathize with your problem. There's this has been a miserable 6 weeks for many people in southeastern Michigan, and we had record rainfall. And I know that's not what you want to hear, but it's the truth. So there's a couple of things that I know Public Services is working on, Madam Mayor. One of them is to look at the street and the ditching that Mr. Blackwell is talking about, and that may include the possible removal and replacement of the culvert with a larger culvert and
S-H-A-S-E-W-S-K-I.
Seksuski.
Right. So he called me Monday, and that's how I know the size, because he told me it went from 18 inches down to 12 inches.
Yeah.
And they got to resize that. But see, prior to that, we never had no problem before. I mean, it's to the point where here's my patio, the backyard floods up, it comes up on the patio and into the house. Where's else is gonna go?
Right.
It's cracking the foundation.
So
Everything is messed up.
So that's one variable that we need to take a look at and to make sure that that ditch is operating correctly. The other variable, unfortunately, is your backyard is flat and your finished floor elevation in your basement is not much higher than the finished grade outside the home. And so because it's flat and because that your backyard doesn't drain real well, you will continue to be susceptible to flooding to some extent. So, we can certainly make some suggestions. Our engineers can help you, and we can make some suggestions on what we think might help or improve the situation. But it will be a challenge because there is not a lot of grade.
I came here 2 summers ago. I've been coming for a couple of years now because, yeah, you're right. The backyard gets about a couple of feet, about a foot of water. And I came down here, I talked to some young lady, Megan, she's not here no more, so Alex came out and took a look at it. And so what ended up happening is it gets to the point where because of the front floods, everything underneath brings it up. And that's where it comes from. We sitting ducks.
Can we count on some people from our engineering department going out there?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and see what we can do.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I don't think you live in a floodplain, which means you're not eligible for flood insurance.
Right.
Which then creates another problem.
Right.
So unfortunately, it falls on you to do the repairs. And I always hate to tell that to people because I wouldn't want somebody to tell it to me either. But if we can mitigate future events, either with some kind of engineering of French drains and a widening of the culvert that might relieve some of the water pressure, I would like to see that happen. So will you make arrangements to meet with the Blackwells?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And I believe we have your contact. I know we have your contact information because I saw your email. So.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
A lot of
You got
emails.
home sale and both sales of house number, right?
Thank you.
Jump in, Jackie.
Yeah, is it possible to get a federal disaster designation for Farmington Hills? Or we don't meet the standards? So that they could perhaps access?
Last time I talked to Congresswoman Stevens, she said we did not meet that threshold.
I mean, I had flooding, 3 storms this summer, I've had flooding in my basement, finished basement. I feel for you. It sucks.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
I've had fans running in my basement nonstop. But we didn't have nearly the flooding that Detroit did, that first rain. They had that 7 inches.
Well, it also
We weren't-
destroyed the freeways,
Yeah.
which is the other reason for the federal disaster designation. So
So
according
that one's
to
gonna be
our,
tough.
and according to Congresswoman Stevens, we didn't meet that threshold. We do have programs if you need major repairs done to your house that you can't afford. If you hit certain income requirements, I believe we can explain all of that to you as well during the meeting. We don't want you to live with mold and mildew growing in your basement,
I'm
in your lower
asthmatic.
level. And we want to make sure that we do all that we can to address your issues for you. All that we can legally do to address your issues for you.
Well, illegal can help too if you can.
Okay.
May I ask
so-
a question?
Thank you for listening.
When did they change the culvert size?
A couple of years ago when they did the streets,
Okay, because,
19.
because I've recently had my streets done in the last 2 years, and we used to have a small culvert. And it was a big thing for the neighborhood to go down and see the water flying over the road because the culvert just couldn't handle the water.
Right.
Well, now since we've really got a massive size culvert, there is no more water, there's no more show going on down there because the water does flow very well.
They increased
So-
they reduced ours.
Yeah, so I wonder why they reduced it when they probably should have expanded it.
I'm not the engineer.
So-
Mr. Mechan's the engineer. I will defer
Yeah.
to our engineering department as well.
That's what we're going to look at.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
He used to be in charge of that department before we promoted him, so, yeah. He's an engineer, so we'll,
Yeah, we'll be talking to you. We got-
okay. We're so sorry that you've been suffering. Yeah, I had the dehumidifiers out in my basement as well, yeah.
Fans, everything, yeah.
Yeah, it's not fun. Anyone else for public, yes? You want in on those meetings too?
Yeah, so I'm Steve Werner. I live across the street from them. I bought my house, 26049 Drake Road, in 2017, late 2017. And it had a finished basement, and it had inspection reports disclosed from the last 2 sales. And there's no evidence of flooding in the basement, which was a really big deal because I wanted a robust house. But then there was in 2018 the upgrades to the street that they live on, which must have included that culvert, because since then there's probably been 6 to 8 times where I've gotten water in the basement that ruined the carpet, and then this year with the record rainfall, complete flooding that of the nature that they're talking about. So what I experienced and have filmed as well with him, that's actually how we met, was filming this, is the water is pooling trying to get through that 12-inch culvert. It's a restriction on a system of a hydraulic system, and now it's circumventing over a berm and using his backyard as a drain basin essentially, and also my backyard.
Right.
So I watch water sloughing off the neighbor behind me, just sheeting into my backyard and filling up my backyard with 6 inches of water from the foundation all the way to the back of my fence line.
Okay, so we'll get out there.
Yeah. And so I'm just here to say it's a newer thing because the basement had no signs of water in it from 2 home inspections, which was a span of about 6 years.
Okay.
So,
Okay, well, we'll take a look at that.
thank you.
Yeah, my backyard is lowland, so I do get some flooding. It happens to come in from the top of my foundation into the basement. Yeah. So, which is very frustrating. Okay, so do we have your address on file? You want to just make sure that it... Okay, well, we'll make sure we get back to you both. Okay.
Order, maybe?
Okay. Anybody else for public question and comments? Okay, seeing none, public question and comment period is closed, and we'll move on to council members' comments and announcements. None? Okay.
I have one.
You have one?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
You going to talk about the safe baseball game?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the safe baseball or softball game real quick. I want to actually, for those people who didn't read the Farmington Voice and the article, the mayor has not said anything yet, but her son has achieved a rather unique honor, and that is having an asteroid named after him. He is he's an astronomer, so we have to extend our congratulations.
Thank you.
The Farmington Safe, the Suicide Awareness for Everyone, the group that deals with mental health, yet on Saturday had our softball tournament, and I want to say it turned out, it was relatively small because we did it very quickly with all the other strangeness that's been going on, but we need to extend our congratulations to the undefeated combined team between Special Services and the Police Department. PD showed up with a team, Fire Department had a team, Special Services had a team. They brought along a few extra people, so they decided we'll just play together. And for a group of people who only half of which knew the other half, it was amazing to watch them, and they played really well. So their names they've got bragging rights for the next year, and of course, the benefits to all of this is that we brought mental health to that topic out to discuss it in an enjoyable way for the community, and we will use the funding from that to continue our community outreach. Also, if you have a softball team or you're interested in that, next year it's always played on the first Saturday in August, and so we are already planning it for the next year, so we're good with that. And the last thing I'd like to bring up is that Farmington Youth Assistance is having an event tomorrow. It's from 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock at the 10 Mile School, which is south side of 10 Mile, just slightly east of Farmington Road. And Farmington Youth Assistance is our diversionary program when kids are starting to have difficulties, if they're truants for school or they break the law, rather than putting them into the criminal justice system, they work with social workers to help get them out of whatever that challenge is. And so tomorrow we want to celebrate summer with them, and we're going to have this event. It's open to the public. I think they're planning on a lot of hot dogs, but we'll have bounce houses and rides, and it's a small carnival. So the community is certainly invited to come out and see what they do. Thank you.
Anyone else? I would like to thank you, Dr. Massey, for mentioning. My son is an astrophysicist, and the Lowell Observatory named a asteroid after him, and that was really exciting. And if you go to the Lowell Observatory, they can show you the motion of the Jordan-Steckloff asteroid, which is, and that was accomplished the same day that he had his firstborn child. So it was a very exciting day for us, and thank you very much. I also want to congratulate Farmington's own Jessica Beamer for winning, and she will be awarded the Dick Tupper Public Service Award, Community Service Award for Neighborhood House at their fundraising gala this Wednesday evening from 4 to 7 p.m. So if you are out by the Longacre House, stop by, write them a generous check for all the work they've done during this COVID period for our citizens and for other residents during other times of the year who are in need. And congratulations to the great people we have that are growing up in our town that want to give back to the community. Next is city manager update.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of items. So August 13th, Beaumont Hospital will be providing a wellness walk and talk at Heritage Park. So again, that's on August 13th from noon to 1 p.m. where Speaker Michelle Soho will discuss injury prevention. And if you'd like some additional information on that, you can call our Nature Center at the Heritage Park at 248-477-1135. And next item is our fire department will participate in the First Response Fights Autism on Saturday, September 25th from 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. This event will raise funds to improve care for individuals with autism spectrum disorders in emergency situations. And for more information, please go to www.crossfit8mile.com/FRFA/. And then the last thing I want to mention is that with all of the power outages that we've had through the months of June and July, our staff, along with the mayor, have been working extensively. I think many folks have seen the article about our complaint that we're trying to file with DTE, and we're working diligently with their staff and our staff to try to remedy and address those issues. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question. Could you update us on the hiring of an economic development director? I know with broadband coming, I think it will be so important that we have someone, on staff, because I know there's going to be just tons
I feel like
of
this is a
business.
deja vu conversation all over again, Mr. City Manager.
We have interviewed many folks,
Mm-hmm.
and we've interviewed some qualified candidates, and I think that's all I'm going to say at this point. We have to consider our options at this point. I think we're in a position right now where the talent is at a premium, and there's just not a lot of people in the economic development field right now that really are a perfect fit for what we're looking for. So just haven't had a chance to really sit down with John Randall and Joe Valentine, my assistant, to review those applicants and try to define or select which one would be the best fit for us at this
So
point.
you're working on it.
We're working on it. Yeah.
It was a good question. Yes. And now, for the signature show of the evening, we have unfinished business, consideration of revised plan unit development, Plan 2, for 2021, located at 27400 12 Mile Road, dated July 23rd, 2021. It was postponed from July 12th, and we welcome you up. So, Mr. Gardner?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Back on May 24th, City Council reviewed PUD Plan 2, 2021. At that time, they tabled the request to allow the proponent to submit revised plans in accordance with the council's concerns that they had expressed at that meeting, along with some of the public input. You did mention that it was postponed to July, I think, 12th, and then the council extended that to allow the proponent to submit revised plans in a timely manner. The proponent has submitted revised plans for your consideration. I would suggest that the proponent present their plans to you following my remarks, followed by a review by your planning consultant, Mr. Rod Arroyo. And this should be done prior to your deliberation on this request. So with that, I would suggest that the proponent go over their plans that they've come up with.
Okay.
Work, or is this thing on here? Okay. Go ahead and click on this. Okay, thank you. Good evening, Council. Raj Patel with Optalis, the developer proponent for this development here. Good to be back with everybody in person. We presented most of this information and the challenges with the site in pretty extensive detail. I think there was a 2+ hour discussion on our project, so try not to be too repetitive here, but because it's been some time, I will go ahead and just put some slides together, go through them a little bit quicker, and what I was hoping to do is go through the slides a little bit. We have a co-developer here that's going to present their part of the sort of reimagined north residential development, and then I'll come back and maybe say some final remarks and then answer questions if that makes sense. So what we have here, this information has been provided. Planning Commission has seen it. I think we've submitted this to this body as well. We are a premier provider of subacute, post-acute rehabilitation services, something that's critically lacking in our view in basic healthcare infrastructure in this community, or at least in terms of our assessment of needs as we decide where to redevelop projects. And I can just get used to this a little bit. This is a little bit of information about our company here. This is just some demographic information, very basic in terms of what's available. We don't do the assisted living piece. This is not what has been proposed, which there is a plethora of communities in Farmington Hills. There's no shortage of those. But the skilled rehab piece, which is basically a healthcare facility and can only be developed with a accompanying certificate of need, is what is the barrier to development of these properties. There's a lot of them in Oakland County. There's a lot of newer buildings. There's just not a lot of new facilities that are of high quality in Farmington Hills. This has been the case for a long time. And this just simply represents just the facilities of above average performance in a 10-mile radius. And this slide is, of those, how many are less than 10 years old? Basically nothing. The only one available is in Novi. So pretty much what you have here is for a pretty heavy demographic of users of those services. They're either settling for an older facility, a shared room, a non-ideal, or let's just say not the most desirable type of a rehab stay, which most people like to do in their close to home where family can visit and so forth. They're not getting that opportunity. So our company has redevelopment plans in Oakland County. We are moving this facility from location in northeastern Oakland County, and as we were searching for a site, we landed upon the Sarah Fisher site. The Sarah Fisher site, again, I promised we won't do this make it super long, has a lot of positive attributes in terms of where it was located and access to the major roads and all, very central to pretty much the other hospital systems and so forth. But the site itself has tremendous challenges, as I probably don't need to repeat here. One of them, really the largest one, besides just the natural features and so forth, is the historic district, or the historic considerations of the historic significance in terms of the properties and so forth that are sitting right in the middle of the site, which really make development pretty complicated. So it's almost lends itself to a co-development, two different types of uses and so forth, which I think I think we're bringing best in class on both sides at this point. We presented to you, and this is a little bit more about our company, our website's on here, tremendous information, so we don't need to go through all of that. This is the current, there's some photos of the existing structures. This is a year and a half ago or so this is probably good. This is like the before. Today, after these rains and storms, it's probably way worse. But this is literally what it looks like when you go through there. So this is what's happening. I know there's some commentary last time about it looks okay from the outside, I guess. This is what it looks like on the inside, and we had to stop taking pictures after a while. So we took a few more pictures. We can talk about this. This is just general. It's a very, very lush site in a sense. These pictures were taken a few days ago. A lot of buffering. This is facing, I guess, would be west towards the neighborhood to the back. So pretty good screening, and we have a lot more of these pictures. We can put those up. So in carefully listening to your comments last time, we presented what was our A plan. And again, my company's only user of the south half of the site, which I think was pretty well received. And looking at the north, we went back, we had a meeting with city professionals late June. That's why we couldn't appear for the July meeting, because we wanted to do this right, not keep coming back to you. We further made some changes on the south side with the feedback we got from the city professionals and adding some green spaces and so forth on the south side, and made it even better than I guess it was before. As to the north, we, to our, to be honest, somewhat financial detriment, we've found an alternative development partner. Instead of an apartment complex that we had proposed initially, we went and met with a couple of other suitors we had, and for a lot of reasons, and it wasn't the highest price. We can change that if you want later on, but we decided to proceed in planning with Robertson Brothers. And Robertson Brothers has got, let's speak to their project, their reputation's stellar. We looked at them in terms of the types of variation and the types of product that they could build. It's not just one type of residential, and they have, I think, very exciting stuff that they're building, and after careful selection, we'll let Mr. Tim Loughran speak to that, selected this type of a concept to be built here, and we've, I think at this point, added for, I think some of the comments we had back was, one of the big ones was, you want owners living next door. You don't want renters. It was a for sale type of a product. This is a for sale. It's got a lot more green spaces and amenities that they will be speaking about. But I think we've tried to find a balance with, of course, the many challenges of this site in trying to optimize it where it becomes financially feasible, economically feasible, just given so many boxes that needed to be checked for something like this to come together and actually be a viable project. So I will pause, and I would like to be able to come back and say some more, but I'll turn it over to Tim Loughran, and he can speak to their products. I'll just go through these slides. So this is the overall concept plan. Just 2 more slides, Tim. And then turn it over to Tim.
Thanks, Raj. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm Tim Loughran. I'm the Director of Land Acquisition for Robertson Brothers Homes, 6905 Telegraph Road on Bloomfield Hills. Let me, actually, if I can make this a little larger. That's a little better. So this is a unique project in several ways. Obviously, there's the historical significance of the site, which we appreciate very much. We think that's a very unique aspect that we're excited to be part of. It's also atypical for us to be involved really in the kind of the middle of the project. Usually, we're at the beginning, we're leading the process, and that really presents some challenges for us. We haven't had the time to fully vet the process, go through the neighborhood vetting, the iterative process. But I believe Raj's group has done a very good job of getting it to this point. I really like their concept. I think they're a very solid group. So we think we can be a very important component of the project. So we looked at several different development options on the site. We believe townhomes are the highest and best use for the property. Really, it's classic urban planning best practice. You're really kind of sandwiched between a lot of commercial and higher density residential. It's the logical transitional land use between office, commercial, medical, retail. There's a lot going on in this area. Certainly doesn't scream low density residential right off of Inkster Road. It also provides attainable new homes in this market, which we think is very important. The typical new home, we really cannot build a single-family detached home for less than $400,000. We cannot physically do it, no matter where we build. So this is an opportunity for potential home buyers that want to stay in Farmington Hills or looking to move to Farmington Hills to get them an opportunity to actually buy a home, not rent. So I want to be very clear, these are owner-occupied, for sale townhomes that we're proposing. And it's under 400,000, under 350, under 300,000. That's a very large subset that's just going unserved in the market, as you can imagine. So our hope tonight is to get consensus on our concept and our vision, which I'm going to walk you through real quickly. Ultimately, get direction from you so we could go back to the Planning Commission with our final site plan with direction on, obviously your ideas on our concept. If it's we don't want that here, that's fine. That's something we need to discuss. But from our standpoint, we feel this is the best land use, and I certainly want to show you what I mean with that. We know there'll be discussions on several neighborly items, and we understand that, and we're certainly appreciative of that. This is what we do. We build 8 to 10 new communities each year throughout the Detroit metro area. So we're very familiar with the process, and we know it's an iterative process. So if I can run through this. Development area, it's 12 acres total with the pond. It's about 9 acres. That's what you have on your plans. The existing zoning is RA1B. We are proposing 154 total, and they're really organized around auto courts and multiple central parks, which I'd like to walk you through. Again, the plan type is for sale attached single-family townhomes. So nobody lives on top of each other, and I'll go through the architecture of that, but these are not rental units. They are attached single-family homes that's attainable for a very large subset of the home buyers. They range from 1,200 to 1,600 square feet, and it's really 2 different buyer segments. The smaller, I think, would cater more to your professional, young professionals. They're 2 bedrooms, 1-car units, and then the 1,600 square feet, that's a little larger, 2-car, that really is more for the smaller family, if you will. So just a couple highlights. Very high quality. We build a lot of this product in the market. I think the closest model we have at this point that's open, because we just closed Royal Oak, might be Brighton, but I would encourage you to walk through those. We were building in Wixom as well. I think that model is closed. So we've done a lot of this, and I'll go through some of our projects, but very high quality, and they are owner-occupied. It's kind of a buzzword, but missing middle. It really is true, though. It is a missing middle. There are people that are just completely shut out of this home building market, and this is what this type of product serves. We're very successful in building this because it meets what cities are looking for as far as that missing middle component, that, you know, it's either large single family or, you know, apartments in many respects. Obviously, new taxpayers, multiple open space pockets throughout. That's what these kind of create, rather than the large apartment buildings, if you will, that you see. These can be centered on smaller blocks of units around a courtyard, which creates really unique and inviting open space areas. It's very walkable, lots of sidewalks. It's an inviting community. And really, again, just make this point again, it's a housing option for residents that are vastly underserved. It just does not exist, particularly in Farmington Hills. Just a little shameless self-promotion. We're a highly respected regional builder. We've been in business, geez, I think it's almost 80 years now. You know, we're a top 5 home builder, but we do not build out in the cornfields. That is not what we do. We like walkable communities. We like infill. Those are the things that really excite us. So that's why we're so attracted to this site. We think it's a perfect location for this missing middle transitional type of development. And as far as townhomes, I'll show you some slides on this. Nobody builds more than we do. We know our costs to the penny. We know the markets. We are the best townhome builder in the in the metro area. If my 11 and 10-year-old heard that, they'd say, "Dad, quit flexing." So this is the site concept, and this is very cartoony, and it's meant to be cartoony. We're really looking for concept. We're looking for direction. You know, the edges could be, you know, they're gray to some degree. What we're looking to discuss today is what our land use proposal is and how that would lay out on this particular site. So what you can see on the outside, and I think it's really important, I'm going to walk through a couple of things on the site plan, but what's really important to notice is all of the outside areas, and I don't think I can point to it, but along Inkster, and then along the street to the north, is it Cheshire? I'm sorry, Cheshire, sorry. All of those units are facing toward the street. You don't see the garages, right? Those are your front doors. They're very inviting. I'm going to show you elevations to that. That's a very important component of this type of project. You will see the best face forward from the outside looking in. But even internally, you can see all of those courtyards, which are nice gathering areas. They look, you know, relatively small on here, but I can tell you we can really program those to be very exciting, very inviting, places where residents can you know, mingle and you know, we don't really make them active, if you will. That's not what this type of home buyer is looking for. Again, these are not apartments. They're not looking for a pool and a cabana and all that stuff. This is really for you know, kind of connections between the neighborhood, which is what we're very successful with building. So, you know, I think those are kind of the main points to it. All the garages are internal. You really won't see those until you get in the community. But again, what we're trying to do is put our best face forward to the public. The units, I don't know if you can see the different coloring, but all the units sort of on the outside along the streets, and then on our south side. South is to the right, by the way. Sorry, I know it's confusing. Those are all our one-car units, and they have, all of our units actually have a front balcony. So those are, again, our one-car units, and on the interior are our two-car units. Just a little bit of site context. So everybody knows the site, obviously, and this is not showing up very well on this, I can tell. But just kind of looks at the overall area. Yes, obviously you've got you know, residential to the west. You've got quite a bit of distance from where our units are proposed to the homes backing to us. It's about 135 feet. So we believe we have a pretty generous buffer in that respect. You know, and again, the edges are something we can discuss. What I'm looking at particularly in this slide is just all of the commercial that is along this corridor. Again, nobody's going to put a large lot home right off of Inkster in this particular location. So from our standpoint, this really is screaming that missing middle kind of transitional land use. You've got higher density residential to the east, you've got medical uses, you've got, obviously Raj's development to the south potentially in the future, as well as other commercial office retail along Northwestern. So it is quite a higher density type of area in the immediate area. This is just an example of elevations and basically our product pictures on the inside. So what's really interesting, I'm going to show you a couple of different slides. What's interesting is this particular plan, and the one I'm showing you right now is the one car. So it's a little bit narrower, but this particular plan, both of the plans we're proposing, we can skin them anyway. So we've done these in downtown Detroit, in the Corktown area. We've done them in Ferndale, we're doing it in Brighton, we're doing in Royal Oak. Each location we can kind of customize if necessary to the location that we're building in. So again, that's that iterative process that I'm talking about. But that's, I think, a very important concept. We're not just kind of trying to ram down a plain vanilla look from one community to another. And then those are pictures of models that we have actually up and running of these products. These are just some of those other elevations I'm talking about on the top left. That will be part of the Sakura Novi development in downtown Novi. Commercial corridor Novi, I guess I should say. Those are actually proposed to be rental units. We did recently get approval on that. We do them as rental and for sale. Again, we're proposing only for sale here. On the top right, that is a plan that we're building in the Lafayette Park area of Detroit currently. Actually, the bottom left is which really exciting project that was on the old Tiger Stadium. So that basically would be the left field bleachers. Previously, that's where those homes were. So that was a very exciting project. And you can just see we can do a lot of different things with this. On the bottom right, that's a proposal we have in West Bloomfield. I only show that because I think it's a unique architecture that maybe could fit where we're talking about, something similar to that. So it's all the same plan, more or less, but we can do a lot of different things with them. So the plans specifically, here are the floor plans. This is the one-car plan. It's called the Aspen. It's about 1,300 square feet. It's 1,200 if they don't select the flex room. I'll be honest, almost everybody selects the flex room. We call it the Zoom room. But basically, that garage has what's called there the flex room, where it can be enclosed, and it looks small there. It's actually a pretty decent little space for an office, that sort of thing. Again, I call it the Zoom room. And your entrance off the foyer. Again, that's the where the porch is. That's where your guests enter. So they enter from the front of the building. You can see the garage is entered from the rear of the building. The center one is the second floor, which is a very open living, dining, and kitchen area. Again, that front balcony, which is over the entryway, and a powder room. And then the third floor is the 2 bedrooms for this particular unit. What we're calling the Pullman, it's the 2-car plan, and it's very similar in concept. It's got a 2-car garage, so it's wider. It's got a small studio down below as well. The second floor is a little more generous. A lot of windows make that a very open, inviting area. You got your living, kitchen, and dining. Everything's very open, as I mentioned. You got a powder room, and then you have the deck as well. And then the next slide on the right is the third floor, where I'm showing the 2-bedroom and den. We build it either as a 2-bedroom, where that den becomes part of bedroom 2, or they could option to have a den. A lot of times that's either an office or that's like a nursery, or a small child's room. So what we think is important is to provide the amenities. And again, these are more passive than active, if you will. But a lot of public seating areas, kind of open gathering areas. Sometimes we have removable furniture, which is kind of interesting. Seasonal landscape. On the bottom left, you see Tivoli lights, which has been a fairly popular amenity. So again, what we try to do is, and I don't have the concept necessarily for this particular site. These are things we're thinking of, and our landscape architect would certainly, as we progress, if we progress, would be able to finalize those plans. They do a great job. I don't mean to go through all of these, but I think this just kind of goes to show how much we know this product. This is what we're building right now, either just closed or just started. So these are all the communities that we're building in. And all of these communities have recognized that this type of plan really is catering to a subset of the population that just has no options. So, we've been successful in working with communities on trying to serve those needs. And all of these communities, unless they're closed out like Towns at the Corner just did, we typically have a model that you can go through and walk through and kind of see what we're talking about. We just had our grand opening in Hazel Park last week. Normandy Square in Royal Oak just recently closed. Ferndale just recently closed. So, some of these certainly are projects that we're in the final stages of. And I'm not even showing the ones we have in the approval process, but we have got about 600 or 700 in the queue in the next few years. So it's something that we believe is there's definitely demand out there, and the pricing that has gone skyrocketing has only kind of helped to make this more attractive to people. So, in closing, what's really unique about our concept compared to the previous one, what I think is very important for this site, and at least this is what we've heard. I've been through the minutes. I know that something that was very important was this owner-occupied concept. I know there was definitely an aversion to the rental aspect. These are people that are purchasing their homes. They're putting their own equity in it. They're going to our design studio. They're upgrading with countertops, cabinets. We have a new design gallery in our Bloomfield Hills space. They can upgrade their countertops, their the cabinets, their flooring, you name it, and that's a very good experience for homeowners to go through, and then obviously customize it to their liking. We've provided a lot of amenities and gathering spaces as I've gone through, and provided those open space pockets and landscaping, which we think are very important. I know there was a comment in one of the meetings, I don't know if it was council or commission, where I saw concern about parking lot lighting. We do not light our parking areas. We do have lights on the rear of the units and the front of the units, just typical sconces on the front and the back. But that is, we would not propose any type of large parking lot lighting. We're proposing plenty of sidewalks. As you can see, there are sidewalks all over here. People can walk all through this community. So, we think that that's something that's important for this type of buyer, and that's something, so they wouldn't be walking around the whole neighborhood. They have their own areas to walk through within the pathways within the project. We feel, compared to the previous plan, we feel that the character would be more in line with the neighboring properties. Again, we can be flexible in how that looks to some degree, of course, but certainly more than a large, apartment building. These really have that more residential feel. And again, they're a for sale product, so it's something that will fit into the area much better. And I didn't mention there would be a homeowners association. They pay their dues, which covers snow removal, the landscaping, any type of replacement of roofs, that sort of thing. So, and the homeowners are in charge of that as we move out of the community after we build out. I mention that because that really guarantees that it'll always be in tip-top shape. They really care about their community. Our communities are very well kept because of those HOAs. The project will provide for a need in the marketplace. I kind of went through that. We think that that's a very important concept. It keeps buyers in Farmington Hills. It also provides for future move-up buyers within the community as they kind of move on in their lives after a few years, 5-10 years. Oftentimes they're looking for a home within their own community. So that's something that we've seen has really kind of kept a community going when we build these communities. And it provides opportunities for young families to buy a house where they just cannot. Even a resale, as I'm sure everybody in this room knows, it's almost impossible to find something at a reasonable, attainable price. So it's not affordable housing. That's not what this is. But what it is it's an attainable price point, which it's very attractive, and a lot of people prefer living this way. They don't have a yard to keep, and they don't have to worry about, say, maintenance of the exterior of the house. So that's very important. And parking is more appropriate for this type of use as well. So I want to stop and take any comments you have and you know, answer any questions you have I think that was the last one I had.
Anybody have any questions at this point?
Raj, did you want to speak one?
I'd rather hear from Rod first.
Yeah.
Keep it moving.
So we want to hear from our planning consultant.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening again. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible in going over our review letter. First of all, just highlighting some of the differences of this plan. As you're aware, the southern portion has the skilled nursing center that's proposed. This proposed plan you have before you for the northern portion has a total of 154 townhomes. And as you counted in your ordinance, it's 462 rooms. Previously, what was proposed would have been 144 units and 371 rooms. So just to give you an indication, this is an increase in the number of rooms and an increase in the number of units over the previous plan. This is not before you for site plan approval. This is PUD plan. So if this were to be approved, there would ultimately have to be a site plan that would be approved by Planning Commission. So there are certainly additional details that would ultimately be needed in order to achieve site plan approval. One of the things we do note is that the building height is still a little bit of a question mark. I think there's different roof configurations, and so that we're not sure if they're looking for relief from the height, just because it wasn't specified with all the different units in turn. I don't think they've been finalized in terms of what they're going to be. So that's just a point of information. You have multiple family districts already specified in your zoning ordinance, RC1, RC2, RC3, and we provided you on page 8 of our letter what those would provide for. They provide for, at the highest level, RC3, 373 rooms. And as I mentioned, this plan before you is 462 rooms, so it is denser than the RC3. And certainly different from what the underlying zoning is, which, as you know, is for detached single family. The courtyard layout we've indicated we think is a positive feature. We think having the courtyards with the units facing onto them is a positive design feature. So that is something we like. In terms of parking, they are proposing in the southern portion now 18 spaces that are going to be land banked. They're still above the total number of spaces that would typically be required for the skilled nursing unit, but they believe that they need those, but there has been at least some change. In terms of the requirement of the RA1B district, we've indicated at the bottom of page 8 what those requirements are. In terms of the front setback, your ordinance requires a 50-foot setback from the right-of-way along Inkster Road. They're proposing 25 feet. In terms of the side setback, which in this case would be an exterior side setback on the north side on Cheswick, the ordinance would also require 50 feet, since that is a public roadway, and they are proposing as little as 15 feet for the very northern units there. In the rear setback, they have dimensioned a setback that is deficient. They're showing a 20-foot setback dimension adjacent to Hickory Oaks there at the closest point along the river as it goes through, or the creek, as you will, as it connects to the Rouge River to the south. That dimension, we believe, is actually an error. If you look at the parking space dimension, which is 20 feet, and then you look at the separation from the back of those units to the property line, it appears that it's closer to the 35 feet that the ordinance requires. So I think that's something that would need to be verified. I think the dimension, as it's called out on the plan, we believe is an error. It says it's 20 feet, but it certainly appears to be closer to 35 feet. So we just bring that up as a question mark and see if the applicant has a response to that. And then that's a summary, really, I think, of the key issues in terms of some of the changes from the last plan that you had before you, and I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, none at this time.
Here.
So how do we proceed now? Is this up to us?
Yes, I think at this point, the process is for it to come back to city council for,
Okay, does anybody
Iteration.
have a motion or a comment?
Go ahead.
I have a comment.
Okay.
Well, so at the last meeting, there were specifically, we'll say 4 kind of bullet points that were mentioned that council wanted to see improved upon. One of them was basically the lack of amenities. That's been improved upon. There is a courtyard now, which has some benefits. It looks like it says there's sidewalks, so walking paths and so forth on the sidewalks, so that has gotten better. Another one was, we wanted owner occupied. We're hearing it's gonna be owner occupied. I'd like to find a way to verify it will be owner occupied so that doesn't end up changing later, where people buy them and then rent them out. So that's getting there. One of them was too much parking, and that is better. These do have garages. Granted, I think 1 car is pretty small, because if you have a working professional family, young people in their 30s, both working, they're gonna need a 2-car garage, but we're getting there. And the other one was density, too high. And that's the one area where we have not improved upon it. In fact, we went the other way. And that's where I'm still struggling, is the density of the site is still pretty intense. So I want to say it's better. It is. I like Robertson Brothers, Robertson Homes, quality stuff from what I've seen. So I'm very glad you brought them in to partner with them. Nice finishes, and I haven't been in a lot of your homes, but they do, from what I hear, they're really nice, and from what I've seen. So I like that. I like the fact you're going to have a HOA, because I think that will help maintain them. Sometimes, apartments or townhouses, condos start out really nice, but after 20, 30 years, if they're not owner occupied, you don't have HOAs, sometimes they start to go downhill. So I do like that as well. So yeah, definitely a lot of improvements. I just still would like to see that density reduced. And maybe, part of that has to do with the setbacks. They are asking for changes to the setbacks. If the setbacks were not changed, the density would have to be reduced somewhat. So anyways, that's where I'm at on it. So I'm struggling at the moment with the density.
Dr. Massey?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Councilwoman Knowles already covered a lot of those. My big concern here is that I'm going to start out with the density. It went up, not down. I'm not really, I'd love to hear an explanation for why what was requested was a decrease and what we got is an increase. Do have concerns on the setbacks. I would like a concrete answer on the height of these buildings, because looking at this, they do seem high. I still think the number of parking spaces seems a little high, given that each one has at least a 1-car garage, if not a 2-car garage, although explanations are there. The amenities are better. I'm certainly having I haven't resigned myself yet. I need to hear some of that. And how will you ensure that these are going to be owner-occupied homes? And is that going to go in the deed restrictions? Because that's a place to put it. So is that something that's going to be put in there? I'd like to hear an answer to that. And with that, I'll reserve any other questions for later. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, I'd like to comment. of course, I appreciate the changes, no more apartment buildings in the townhouses. I have to say, there's not one single one of your developments I'm not familiar with. They're just beautiful, well thoughtful, so I'm impressed with the new partnership. But I'm still confused about the partnership, because I'd rather have no skilled nursing on the corner and all these beautiful townhouses. So I'm a little confused about, because I'm still concerned about the number of beds in the skilled nursing being 2-story, and whether this is not going to become a skilled nursing but a more of a long-term care facility. Because I know people to go in skilled nursing and they'll be there for beyond the usual length of stay. So maybe my question is to skilled nursing right now.
Okay, anyone else? Yes.
Is there any consideration for EV charging stations, even the prep for that in the garages, because you're going to be marketing this to fairly young people, and I'm sensing that that's something that they're going to want. Is that a plan that you have with this?
Sure.
So I'll answer your question first directly, I guess concerning more to the skilled nursing facility. The skilled nursing facility is going to be between 120 and 140 beds, 2 stories. There's different types of patients, as you're familiar. Most of these will be short-term patients. Unfortunately, sometimes people don't recover 100% and they end up requiring a long-term stay, and we're not able to just discharge them. They need to stay and get the care. So there's always a percentage of folks that turn long-term care, and they'll just be there. So I'm not really sure I understood the concern about the 2-story building and so forth on the south side. If you could please clarify the question.
Well, the 2-story building just seems out of character with these beautiful townhouses. And of course, it's on the corner of a very prominent corner of our community. So I'm kind of concerned about the look of the building in contrast with the beautiful townhouses.
Well, it's pretty far back. I mean, if we go, let me see if I can, this isn't touchscreen. So if you look at the overall site, this is a few hundred feet away. Our building, the skilled nursing facilities, several hundred feet away. There's that historic structure in the middle. So, I mean, it's going to look like almost 2 different types of developments adjacent to each other. As Tim had pointed out, this is kind of a multi-use type of an area. Right across the street, there's commercial, there's, you know, the vet hospital and so forth. So it's kind of a pretty good mix of residential, commercial, and so forth. So I don't know that either one of these are out of place for anything, because they're just 2 different types of usages of this rather, you know, lot that's split up with this historic structures in the middle, and it really has got like that natural split. So, and we've looked at it, and Tim can explain. We've looked at flipping it even, and that doesn't work for many reasons, engineering and so forth. So this is really. This is why it took us 3 months to get back here. Every concern in terms of for ownership, how does that get addressed? What does this look like with, you know, the amount of units that can go there and the economics of it and what they're used to building, which I'll let him speak to, and if this is, you know, a viable project. And as I understand it, the density, yes, it did change in terms of units, but it's still in their typical range. So we didn't dictate the density. We didn't ask them. We just asked them, how would you build this if you're building it in a town like this? And relied on their expertise to lay out units in sort of the most appealing way. And this is the end product of it. So we, you know, from my side, we haven't really mandated a minimum or an increase or anything. It just laid out naturally this way, and they know their business. I don't know if there's any other questions for me, but I can switch over to Tim. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. It was mentioned earlier that it's going to be HOA, and there's streets So are these streets going to be private streets? Are you going to do your own snow removal and garbage pickup? Or will these be city streets that you're
I'm
speaking
going to
of?
let Tim answer that if that's okay.
Sure.
Tim?
All right, so just want me to hit these one by one?
Yes, you can.
Good, okay. So the building height, I guess let me show the examples a little bit more. Since their concept at this point, I don't know exactly what the building height is. If we went with a flat roof, those are over 35 foot because, to the parapet. And some cities, do it by parapet. The fire department usually requires a certain height. Long story short, if we would go with a more traditional type of pitched roof like that, we're under 35 feet to the midpoint. So I don't know where that falls necessarily in line with what those requirements are, but typically we're under 35 feet at the midpoint. So if that's an important factor, we would make sure we would be under that height.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can we break for about maybe 3 minutes?
Oh, of course.
If it's possible, Mayor, for us to break?
Yes, it is. Do you mind if we take a
Not at all.
3-minute break?
Not a problem.
Thanks.
Are one of these guys going?
5,
All right, where was I?
about 35 feet in height, but we can
35 feet.
accommodate, yeah.
Yeah, if we could, have the PUD at 35 feet max, we could live within that 35 foot. So that's what we would propose. There were questions on setbacks. So I know there's 50-foot requirement on the streets. We're proposing 25 on Inkster. We feel that there is a lot of landscaping along the road already, so we would propose keeping the units along Inkster at 25. I understand the ones on Cheswick, they're at 15, and I think that that's 50 as well. I would propose if we could make that 25 as well, we can push those back a little bit. I know John will tell me there's grading issues there anyway, so I think it makes sense to pull those back. Our planner got a little zealous maybe on putting those in there. So I propose 25 feet for street setbacks. The setback along the west actually is more than 35 feet is what we were able to ascertain. It's actually 38 feet. The requirement, I think, is 35 feet. So that is why those are where they're at. So I think that answers the setback questions. Just going down my list here. So the height, I think I answered. I don't know if that was sufficient, but okay. Ensuring the owner-occupied. So it is important to us, too. We don't want these just to become investor properties where people rent them out. So it's very important to us. In our master deed, we typically have a percentage per building that's allowed to be owner-occupied. I don't know on the top of my head. I think it's probably around 40%, which sounds high, but that is on a building-by-building basis. So not every building is even going to have a rental. I would say our typical community maybe has 10% that are rental units. So we try to keep that to a limit as well. We will have a master deed. Our master deed will be very specific about the number of units that can be rented out overall and within each building. So that is something, those are controls we have. So hopefully that will keep your mind at ease on that. We don't rent out any of them. So they'd all be sold from Robertson. The EV charging, I failed to mention it. That is what we provide, an EV charging outlet, a 240 in all of our garages. So that's something we've been doing since our Riverside project in Auburn Hills. And we feel it's a lot of value that we provide to our residents. So we are providing that. We don't provide specific types of charging units, but we provide the outlets so they can put in their own system. Yes, it is prepped for it. Yes.
You mentioned the 38 feet setback. Was that scaled off of a plan or is that off a survey? Because as you know, one is a heck of a lot more accurate than the other.
Well, it's scaled off this cartoon. So
okay. So it means it may or may not be accurate at all.
Yeah, it's more than the 35-foot minimum, I think is what we're trying to convey. And again, those are the edges I was talking about. So we recognize that as well. The private streets, the comment of the private streets, they are all private streets. Very rarely would we have public streets within a townhome community. Mm-hmm. So these would be private streets the HOA would maintain. Mm-hmm. Snow removal, we'll have areas where we'll designate for snow removal area and maintenance of the road. So 20, 30 years, they'll replace the asphalt with the reserves they have in their HOA funds. So we plan all of that on the front end, knowing that they're going to need to be replaced in the future. I think there's a question on trash pickup. We do not have any dumpsters. We don't do dumpsters for our townhomes. What we do is we have them just like a single family. They're in the garage. Mm-hmm. They go out on the day of service. Either, some cities have it city provided. Other cities require us to have the HOA, have a service. But it is all done individually in each garage. So we do plan that out as well.
Well, it seems like it's a beautiful community. The facade of the buildings are beautiful. I did look at some of your other properties, and they're really, really nice. Okay. My only concern is the density in this particular area. That 12 Mile and Inkster is really the gateway to Farmington Hills, coming into our community, and to see that dense of a development. I don't know if that's something that, I think like Valerie, I am struggling with that's a little too dense for me. It's, I think, more than we had
when we met earlier about the density of the project, and that would be one of my major concerns. And the fact that I don't know exactly, just looking, I'm not a visual person, was trying to see, the open green spaces, what type of landscaping that would have. I know that's not in the project itself, but that's something that I'd like to see.
We could certainly flesh that out more and provide more landscaping. Again, this is, like I said before, it's a cartoon, so we could provide, we will, when we get further along, we would provide landscape details and actual, construction documents. But I'm happy to provide more detail on that as we kind of move through the process. Just hitting the density head on, obviously I know that's kind of the one issue that's I'm still a bugaboo. By moving the units off of Cheswick, by nature, that's going to reduce some density. We're willing to look at some of those edges as we've talked about. So I think the density just by nature would come down through that iterative process. I will say this product, though, cannot build at something like a 8 units per acre or a 10 unit. It's not economically feasible to do it, even if we got the land for free, because you're talking about the land. It's not just the land acquisition, it's the land development costs. So you'd be shocked at how much it costs for land development, and when you have less units to spread the costs across, these homes are not attainable anymore. So you have to get to a certain level of density. We've built these at, I'm shocked to say, we built them at 22 units per acre in Hazel Park. They wanted that. They wanted people there. We build them, this is right at 17 units per acre. That's right in the middle of where we typically build our townhome communities. So that's why we showed you this. This is our kind of our typical model, if you will. Every community is different. I get it. It's easy for me to say, but I'm more concerned about those edges than I am about how many units there are on the center of it, because nobody's going to see that necessarily. Yeah, I guess there's a traffic impact, but these are half what a single family would be, and even less from traffic. So it's not necessarily traffic, it's not necessarily impact to services. I think it's more how we deal with the edges, and then by nature that kind of leads to the density equation. So we wanted to show a plan that we would love to build, but of course, you hadn't seen this, we hadn't really vetted the process. So I think by nature that the density will come down as we start moving these things back a little bit. But by nature, it's not a townhome project if you can't get a certain amount of density, because it just does not work out economically.
And it's nestled in between two really beautiful subdivisions, Hickory Oaks and Wood Creek, with the large lots. And then you come into the city, and the first thing that you see is that high density development. It might look great somewhere else in Farmington Hills, but I think for this particular spot, for me, is a challenge.
Okay. My turn then.
Yes.
First let me say that Robertson Brothers has not only an exceptional reputation, but they deliver on that reputation every single time. So if I were going to pick a building partner, this would be top-notch for me. But that also means that I've had the ability to peruse your site and what you've been doing and where you've been doing it and how it looks. And Jackie's being nicer than I am. I don't like this. And I don't like this for a simple reason. There are 2 underserved markets in Farmington Hills and in most communities. One underserved market is the new home buyers and the younger families that are coming in that need to be at a price point where they can afford to buy their own house. And I understand that, and that's where these townhomes come in. The other underserved area is the group of people that are currently living in 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath, 2,000 to 4,000 square feet homes that are ready to downsize. And they don't want 3 layers of stairs. They don't want to go up and down stairs all the time. They want nice ranch units, like the ones you built in Northville, like the ones you're building in other places.
Right.
And that price point is higher, but the density is lower. And the person that you attract to buy those is a different buyer. And it's not somebody who's going to rent their home. and have those issues, but they're willing to spend between $450,000 and $550,000 for a scaled-down version of what they love in a very nice area. In 1971, getting old is a curse. When Farmington Township decided to become Farmington Hills as a city, there were two neighborhoods that we had to bring in to the vote. One was Brittany Hills in Quakertown, and the other was this area, Wood Creek. And those homes are between $500,000 and $1 million plus. You've got a project going in at the corner of 13 and Inkster, which is going to be $950,000 to start. Yeah. That's
It was.
That's just a look at the door, right? And so I know what you're capable of building. I've also seen the projects that you built in Birmingham and in other areas, and I want to know why. I personally, I can't support a project that is going to go into an area where we have upscale housing and bring in this kind of density when I know there's also a market for the other kind of homes that we want to bring in that really have more of a tie to a rehab center and maybe some PT that you might want to put in there. And really kind of tie the whole project together. It's kind of like eating a disjointed meal. It's not fitting for me. And I don't know, did you consider the upper scale 1,400 to 1,600 square foot ranch units that would appeal to people my age?
We did. Yeah, I guess the way I'd answer that is I 100% fully agree with what you're saying. There's definitely a market in Farmington Hills for that buyer. We've been searching, to be honest. We actually had I guess it was Zoom, but we talked to the Planning Commission about a specific site that we had under contract not too far from here. And, we couldn't put it all together, but you don't really have the ordinances for that, first of all. That's something that, if I could say from a practitioner, I know, I'm just saying in general, the city, just from a practitioner standpoint, there's really nothing that you have that would allow that type other than a PUD. But I fully agree. We would love to buy a large enough property that would fit in that context. We did look at it on the site. The challenge is 9 acres might sound like a lot. It's not when you're talking about that type of product. You'd be lucky to get 30, maybe 30 units on there, which, that might sound appealing in one respect. To me, it doesn't work economically. It's not, again, it's the same argument I had with the townhomes with the lower density. It's the land act per unit, but you can pay more per unit. So the land act isn't as maybe much of a factor. It's that land development cost. It is outrageous to build land development on a 30-unit project. Now, we're doing it in some communities. But we're also selling them in the $700,000 and $800,000. And from our standpoint, you're right. The homes to the west are absolutely beautiful. That neighborhood, I drove through it today. I kind of got lost and drove around just to drive around. It's gorgeous. So I agree with what you're saying. But the other part of this really fronts on the Inkster. We have a neighbor there, and I want to be very conscious to that neighborhood and buffer as much as we possibly can. We'll buffer more than what we're showing for sure. But we see this as really facing on Inkster and facing more of that commercial area than to the west. So a couple things. We just couldn't get the lot yield to make it viable in our mind. And we'd have to have 700,000, 600,000, whatever that number is, backing on the Inkster. That's just not something we're interested in doing in this location as far as being on Inkster. So when we build those, they're enclaves. They're something where it's not fronting onto them. We've got a long frontage on Inkster, and that's really where that whole conversation kind of ended with that product. So I don't disagree. We do it very well. We're probably the best at that too. Again, flexing. But at this specific location, that just wasn't something that we thought we could do economically viable. And that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but
No, it's not.
it's difficult to make that work
And I'm
there.
looking for a new house.
We would love to find a location for that, for sure. I mean, no question, but like I said, we had one under contract on 13 Mile, and we would love to do that, because I agree, there is a market for that, no question about it.
It's just, it's the compatibility with the neighbors that
I agree.
we have promised for years and years and years. And I can't go back on that promise. So I'm trying to find a way for you to build in our city. And some of the units you built are attached condos for those ranch condos. And you could do a lot of park buffering and trails along the Inkster Road part.
It,
In my head, it's beautiful.
So again, I don't disagree.
I can't get it out of my head.
Just speaking to the attached, we were building, you referenced our Northville project, we were building duplex ranch and story and a half, and we could not sell them because those buyers don't want to be next door to somebody at 500,000 or 600,000 or whatever they end up being. So we went back, we lost units to do the detached, and that project finally got jump-started. So I've had concerns with building attached ranch product because of that, and I think we're a little shell-shocked from that project, so we haven't done it since. But again, the density, you're talking 3.5 units per acre. And from a land development perspective, we don't believe we could make that work.
Yeah, I'm not a builder. I'm just, okay.
We would propose it if we felt it was more viable.
Okay. It just seems to me we're going in the wrong direction, and we're not satisfying the needs of the residents who've put in a lot of money in their homes to live where they are. But I appreciate your comments. It's
And we are willing to buffer. I know that that might be lip service. We're not married necessarily to this plan. Again, I came here looking for concept and having that conversation if this is a use that would be appropriate for this location, which we believe it is. But if the answer is yes to that, then we certainly would deal with the details on the edges.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
Quick question. Do you often do, I'll call it a mixed-use development, where the development closer to Inkster would be more dense, and then that would be the western half, which buffers the subdivision, would be less dense, like ranches? Do you do kind of more of a mixed-use development, or is that not your model? I mean, can something like that work to help you get a little bit more density, but yet to get the ranches that would ideally be more similar and more in a transition from the neighborhood to the west?
So the answer is yes. We've done that. We did that for our Normandy Oaks project. I showed you the townhome portion of that. Just north of it was single family. In fact, we had garages, detached garages that were accessed through the townhome section, so it was really kind of unique in how that was interwoven. I don't know if we've done townhomes and
That was the
detached
Royal Oak
condos.
project, right?
What's that?
That was the Royal Oak?
Yes, it's one of our Royal Oak, yes.
Yeah.
So, that's townhomes and single family. That's a little different than this. I wouldn't say never, never say never. We can take a look at that. It's kind of a mixed bag to put those together, and I don't know necessarily how it would work, but I wouldn't necessarily say no to it.
The other thing I just want to make sure you're aware of is that with the historical component of the site, the development does have to be in character and in keeping with the historical buildings that are going to stay. And in fact, there was an agreement with the Historic District Commission, if possible, to reuse materials as much as possible from the demolition.
I did see that.
Yeah, I just want you to know that, because that kind of dictates the style that you may have to build in.
So we did see that, and I understand. From our the way we look at that, and of course we're open to things, but I don't know how a brick mason would warrant something like that. So, we have to be careful on, we're building new homes and we're providing warranties, and we have to build something that, from our standpoint, stands the test of time.
Oh, of course, you have to use the correct materials. I just mean the style.
Okay,
It has to be
yes, that's certainly something. That's why I showed you all those
I'm not necessarily
variations.
suggesting you use the exact bricks.
Okay.
That's not what I
Okay.
meant.
Yeah, because it does say things like that. From our standpoint, I think.
Possible.
Right.
So maybe in the courtyards or
Yeah,
things
things
like
like
amenities.
piers. We've already talked about things like piers, things like community signage, walls. Those could reuse those materials. From a style standpoint, yeah, that's why I showed you all those elevations, because we can be flexible to some degree on matching those. Now, I don't know. You don't want to mimic it to where it looks ridiculous. We do that in Detroit, and it's some people want us to match it exactly, and others are like, you will never match it exactly, so do something different. So it's an iterative process. Everybody has an opinion on it, but we would certainly work within the parameters, of course.
Okay, before I ask for a motion or we continue, there are two people that have turned in cards that want to speak. This is not a public hearing, but if you would like to give us 2 minutes of comments each, that would be appropriate. So, and I have Jeff Dawkins and Scott Griffin.
Good evening. I'll be very short. Just like to go over yet again the density issue relative to how many units are going to be proposed. The other factor that wasn't spoken about as much today was the height. It's 3 stories high. And I'm glad they were able to do something about the owner versus the rental, so we were pleased with that. But the density is something that really startles me still, and as well as the height.
Okay, thank you very much. He was 32 seconds.
Yeah, that was good. I'll use the rest. No, that was Jeff Dawkins. I'm Scott Griffin.
Okay.
So I think we're all on the same page, and you said 88% of what I was going to say, so I won't belabor it. I will say, with regards to density, that while it's not almost twice what the maximum multifamily zoning in Farmington Hills would allow, it's pushing it. And if this were approved as is, it would be the single highest density property zoning in Farmington Hills. So it's absurd. So I know that this was presented as Plan B to the first plan, and you had several things, and the public had several comments last time. The board had several comments. One of those comments apparently was heard, and that was from renting to ownership. But then we still have the issue of ownership, and by the way, I think the single greatest change from last time was the selection of Robertson homes. I agree, they're phenomenal. We met with the developer and said, great choice, they're the best. It's really good. It's the product that we have the issue with. So what we've done is we took every one of what Robertson calls their urban model, which are the townhomes, and we showed every single one in the same format, where we show the plan, which was shown on a slide. We show the aerial photograph, and then we show what's on all 4 sides. And what you'll see on all 4 sides is there are shopping centers, there are roads, there are highways, there are industrial, there are all different kinds of projects. Some of them have residential on 1 or more sides. All of the residential units that were all shown, and it was interesting that the example of the highest density was it Hazel Park? Yeah, this ain't Hazel Park. And so, no offense, but this is different. So all of the residential in all of the urban models that they have,
For 2 minutes.
thanks, are in the hundreds and 200,000s. There's nothing that's 500,000 to $1 million. As the mayor said, they also have single-family ranch condominiums that are beautiful, and that I disagree with one thing he said. I think you can develop economically. You can develop them. Hickory Oaks has the same number of units, 37. We have 8 times the area. Our roads are longer. Our development costs were way higher, and our homes are worth 50% of what your homes sell for, the ranch homes. So it's definitely economically viable. What I'd like to do is leave the council, and I can leave it with Gary, I guess, is every single one of these where they have their urban plans and show you what's around them. And then I also include the plans and the pictures of all of their luxury ranch homes, which the mayor is obviously familiar with, but I think the rest of you would be very favorably impressed. Robertson, awesome. We're not saying anything against the south side of the development, but it's the wrong model.
Thank you. I let you go over, but.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And then we have one more, Linda Roberts.
Good evening. My name is Linda Roberts, and I listened to the plan that you proposed. And I just want to say first that I've seen those kinds of plans. I know that there's something going up at Orchard Lake and Northwestern with that kind of finish. I see it downtown. That does not complement our neighborhood. We need something that's going to blend in with what what's already there. Also, living in Hickory Oaks, we would like to see something neighborhood-wise, housing-wise, that's going to complement that. It was stated earlier that at 13 in Inkster, they're building houses that are going to start at $900,000. We know that in our area, that area can be beautiful. I understand it has to be feasibly economic, and I just hope that you all are the ones to build that out and make it beautiful.
Thank you. Absolutely. I mean, let me be clear. I don't think there's one person on this council that doesn't want to see this project get developed. It's just how the residential component starts to fit in.
I understand, and I'm just responding to a little bit.
And you've been jumping through a lot of hoops, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. So again, I've said this once, I'll say it again. We have had extensive conversations around the density. We knew this was brought up last time. Is there a way to do a product that's less density? So and we've met with Scott Griffith and and Jeff over there a couple of times. Scott, at least a few conversations. I will actually respectfully disagree with his comments about what the price point and so forth ought to be. We have the builder, who I think everybody said is reputable. He has no reason to stand up here and make up numbers of feasibility and so forth. We've looked at this, Mayor, so many different ways, and this site, everybody has a plan for it in a sense what the ideal site should be, but with the challenges of the site, the way it drains, the way the utilities are missing, and so the land development cost here, our engineer is here, this did not develop last time for a reason. I was very impressed and I should say even inspired by the conversation about diversity and inclusion and all of that, which is great if those are the values that are going to be aspired for. Not allowing attainable, as Tim has said multiple times, attainable, manageable price point entry to a nice city, that doesn't sound very inclusive. If it's $500-600 or go to the next town, that's fine, but that's kind of what I heard earlier was a little bit conflicting with that. We feel that these guys can make it beautiful. We spent 2.5 months with them. They're nice guys, and they're not going to put anything up that ultimately, even if you approve it, they still have to sell it. So they're not in the business of building things that don't work. They've studied the demographics extensively in terms of the economic demographics and so forth, and this is, if we're doing residential and it's not going to be a commercial corner, we already are kind of doing a public infrastructure on the south side, so this is more residential. Again, the product that's missing in this part of town, close to Northwestern and everything else, this product is the product in our view. It sounds like now I'm flexing, but we've got here the best in class on both sides. We feel like we're the best in class on the rehab business. They're probably the best in class in this type of product development. So I want to assure the neighbors that we want to be good neighbors. If we build anything, ultimately, you know where to find us if you're not happy with it. It's going to be a good product. We want to attract people to our facility, which is good. I provided some photos, and they've been provided before. They're fantastic looking buildings, attractive, and these are going to be the same way. So I'll rest unless you have any more comments or questions. We've tried to do what we can at this point. We've exhausted every option, including conversations for incentives of with all the special challenges, is there anything available? We've had meetings with Metro-Mexican, nothing's available. So if the land could just, get a big grant for the development piece, then sure, we could do some condos, or, that goes out of his budget. But there's no help available, no abatement available. So it's really hard to then make it all work with the cost of construction and so forth. That's where that's where we're stuck. We started this about a year and a half ago, almost 2. Cost of construction already is reaching where it's starting to get cost prohibitive, even on our side, but we still want to do the project. We believe in this area. We believe this is our product's the right product for sure for this market, but our products are like a loss leader. Our development's a loss leader with just the restoration of the historic structures. It's north of $4 million. Just keeping it in some sort of a way where it's not collapsing, and then we go from there. So if we don't have a good suitor on the other side, which I feel like we've brought the best suitor to the table that we could, and they're not comfortable, I don't know that we'll have another one or an alternative. But I just want you to please reconsider the concept of a beautifully done, a little bit higher density than maybe everybody wanted, and see if we can get this project developed, the corner developed.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
If I could say one more comment.
How low can you go in density?
Just to comment on the cost of land development, it obviously changed a lot. I mean, in the last 5 or 10 years, our costs, it used to be 800 a lineal foot. It's now approaching 1,800 to 2,000 a lineal foot. So it costs on everything. I mean, everybody hears about construction and lumber and all of that. We've been dealing with land development costs for a while, so it would shock you what it costs to do land development. So I don't want to sound like a woe is me, but that is a major driver in our industry. And then the other part of that is, we showed a picture of it. There is, and it's easy for me to say, I walked in this summer, but there is a very significant tree buffer on our property, which would be remaining, and then also our neighbor's property. We've got about 135 feet. My point in saying that is that's the closest. I'm sorry, that's a good point. And it's not shown on this. I do have another one that actually calls that out as 135 feet at the closest point. So there just is a huge woodland buffer that exists there. So I guess the point is it's not like this is on the property line and they'll be seeing this right in their backyard. But to that end, I understand and appreciate their concern, and I would have the same concern. So from our standpoint, we've talked about increasing the setbacks along Cheswick. We'd be, if it is in an effort to move this forward, we'd be okay with increasing the setback along the western perimeter, which again then would serve to reduce some of the density that I know is also a concern. So that's how we would approach this. Of course, we can landscape the heck out of it as well, mega pines, whatever we need to do as well. We're happy to do that because we are neighborly, and we do think those things through as well. That's all I had.
Okay. Thank you. There's no way we can reduce the density overall here.
We'll get to the point of reducing setbacks. It will by default reduce the density. We wouldn't be able to fit as many on if we have setbacks to the perimeter. So again, we've got, I think, around 35 feet or whatever that is to the west. Increasing that could move that whole row back. I don't want to throw out a number, but That seems to be the major concern, which in my mind is the area where we can improve the most. And again, that would reduce density.
Okay. Back to council. Oh, Mr. Jaffick.
I just as a point of order or procedure, what you have before you is the density before you, and when council considers a PUD for final approval, it really is approving a plan with the density on the plan that's before you. So I just wanted to make that clear that right now you don't have a lower density plan before you to consider, and once you're approved, of course we do the PUD agreement and it comes back, but the density is set before we start on the PUD agreement as part of the procedure at this point in the process, along with the setbacks, along with the building height. And those are set in pretty clear terms, typically with a PUD before council at this point. I just wanted to mention that because I'm hearing some comments from Mr. Loughran about they'd be willing to consider changes to the plan in the future, but
We'd be locked in now.
we would be locked into this density with some uncertainty as to where we would stand to insist upon density reductions in the future. This is the point in time when those things are determined going forward, and it sets the stage for what happens with the PUD agreement and then the site plan, the detailed site plans that come in.
Okay, you're going to hate me now. How long would it take you to come up with a slightly reduced or majorly reduced density plan with some different setbacks?
Obviously, at the pleasure of the council.
It would please us very much if you would.
I don't. It's a bit of a it's a bit of a moving target, but I also, it's hard to horse trade up here. I think it's probably beneficial to show a plan that has greater setbacks and what that ultimately does for density. Our guys could do this within a 2-week period.
Mayor?
Yes.
May I ask one more thing? If they're going to come back with a plan with less density, and possibly look at maybe a different configuration of homes, if even I don't know if that's possible, but
I think he's heard us.
yeah, no, the other thing I'd like to do is can we work to have a meeting with the city administration one more time to talk about any sort of tax incentives, brownfield redevelopment credits? I know you've had a conversation already about this, but can we please just address it one more time to see if there is something we can do to help out there? I mean, the site is obviously a brownfield, and I don't know if we can make something there work to try to help, if we can even bring in someone from the Historic District Commission, since they're involved in this as well, and just have one more conversation and see what we can do to help.
Go ahead, Raj.
We do want to somehow
I'm all
make
ears.
a development work that works for everyone.
We've talked, I'm sorry, go ahead. Gary's answering.
Well, we're always happy to meet with the proponent for sure. We've talked about brownfield. There are brownfield dollars that are available for certain aspects of the project. There's certainty in that. I think some of the other more creative things that we tried to talk about were some financial vehicles that Farmington Hills just doesn't qualify for. You have to be an entitlement community in order to leverage some of those economic development vehicles.
Where are those?
So, our hands are really tied at this point from that perspective.
Could we, if we have this meeting, could we bring in someone from the Historical District Commission so maybe they can understand what we're dealing with here?
Happy to do that.
I can't speak for them or put words in their mouth,
Sure.
but, it's worth another conversation to see if there's any other creativity there with
Happy
these
to have
structures.
that conversation, sure.
Yeah,
We've looked at the brownfield, we've already assumed that in the pro forma, so that's already baked in, every last dollar of that stretched in. We had conversations around maybe like an infrastructure grant or something, just because of there's existing capacity issues and so forth. And they were kind of productive, but we don't really think we're getting anything. So that's really where we are. Even if there's a grant for restoration of the building itself, this historic building, the main administrative building that we've basically, obviously got the notice to proceed with historic district, that takes a big burden off, and that helps tremendously. But there was nothing there. There was nothing on the infrastructure piece. So we're kind of striking out big time, and then we're getting pushed to sort of economically, the math's got to add up some way, and that's really where we are.
By the way, I was very hopeful when I saw a bill come through from our state senator, Jeremy Moss, that was signed by the governor, which gave some relief to allow for some tax abatements that would go to the residents that purchase, but we don't qualify for those. And the new bill was just an update to correct a problem that they had with timing in one site in Detroit. So that was very disappointing. I think the legislature is going to need to come up with not just allowing for some kind of property tax credits for some core cities, but open it up to everybody, because we're at the point now where if we had those available, it would help the seller of the properties be able to tell people.
Agree.
Yeah, and so those tools are just not available, but I would like to see what else we can do. You're hearing from a council that really is excited about doing something here. And we're trying every which way to make it work. And if you need a few more weeks to see if you can come up with a residential combination like you did at Normandy Oaks, that had the advantage also of having their senior center right there across the street, I believe. That was the other Royal Oak? Okay, yeah. And we know you're going to be doing great work in downtown Farmington, but we would just, my dad was a developer and a builder, and I know what he struggled with. And we know you're not trying to ruin our city by coming in with a development. We just need to make it a little more compatible with the area that's around it. And if you could help us out in any way, we would.
If you could help us out in any way,
we would love to
that
give
would be
you both the
fantastic,
opportunity.
'cause
Yeah.
We have been asking for help since day one, even with the Historic District Committee, and that's kind of led to where the South Side development and so forth. So we've tried to sit down. We're happy to meet again. Appreciate the reminder. If something could be done, it would be great. Public-private partnership. We can make it truly spectacular. I mean, I think this is going to be great if everybody can, get comfortable with it. But, it's all about making the math work. Because what's the point of approving something and the project never builds? Because it's going to come back and he's going to come up with numbers that he's never going to be able to sell a home for. By the time he's done reducing what he's going to pay us, then we're done. So you'll be dealing with the next batch of us in 5 or 10 years, and the site will sit like this forever.
I know. I understand that there's a difference between this part of Inkster Road and the part of Inkster Road that backs up, that is at the corner of Inkster and 13 Mile. They're very different by nature. One has a golf course view and certain other things, and so we understand that. But you would be willing to come back?
Buy here, and then they'll move there. This will be the starter home, and then they'll move up to the bigger home.
Yes, that would be nice.
I'll let him answer. He wants to answer.
I'm more than happy to come back. So certainly we can do that. In the interest of perhaps moving forward, and maybe this isn't, something you're comfortable doing, but, again, I mentioned The setbacks, that's important to me because I physically can't fit any more in. This is how these are designed, so I understand Mr. Jopik and where he's going with that. I'm just doing the math by looking at it. We've got 8, 13, we've got 13 right there for sure if we made that setback more. So, now we're under what the previous plan was. If we are to move it forward, that could be a density that we could live with just by nature of losing those 13 units. And again, we would lose some along Cheswick. So if you're not comfortable horse trading, which I'm not necessarily either, those are ways to get around, to address Mr. Jopik's concern about the density.
Okay, so at this point, it sounds like you're willing to have us table this.
Either that, or as I mentioned, approve it with the lower density based on what we think we could, ultimately end up losing with the larger setbacks. And then we go to Planning Commission for final site plan, I think is the next step, and I believe it.
But they'd be kind of tied into what we do.
Sure. Right, so.
How much time would you need?
Well, I was thinking of moving forward tonight, but if again, it's the pleasure of having us come back with a new plan that kind of dictates that on more concrete numbers, we're willing to do that. We could
Like
come
to
back.
still come in August?
Sure. This would be something we make a priority and have a plan. Now, I don't know if staff would need to review it. Need time to, I want to speak for them, obviously.
How much time would you need?
Minimum week. And we got.
I know. 4 weeks.
4 weeks?
No, come on. They're not coming in with a brand-new plan.
No, not a brand new plan. They're just going to modify
They're modifying
the setbacks.
it. We can figure out a way to expedite reviews.
I'd love to come back in the next meeting.
I
if
would love to
possible.
hear Councilmember Knoll offer a motion. Or Dr., I always defer to her. She's like really good on zoning. And she's on our Historic District Commission.
I wasn't prepared yet.
What we can do, it's a
So what
motion
am-
for
are we ta-
postponing.
Yeah, are we tabling this? Is that what we're doing to the next
Postponing.
meeting?
Right, well, that's
Well, we could
If I
table it for,
2 weeks. But,
or up to 4 weeks, and if they can come in sooner, they can.
There you go.
yeah, I think,
But if he's
Postpone.
not done doing his modifications for 2 weeks, then they need a week for review.
That's why we could do it up to 4 weeks, and then you could come in sooner.
Or we can do it 6 weeks and you can come in sooner.
There's no way to approve something with a little lower density today, or is there a number that doesn't work any, do we have a number that? No?
No.
I guess I should ask.
Yeah, well, again, the next step in the process, just so you're aware, is actually the PUD agreement. Before it goes to the Planning Commission, it has to come back with a PUD agreement that gets approved by City Council. And with that PUD agreement, we have a plan that's attached to it typically that has the details that are, there are a number of missing details that were mentioned and discussed, verbally indicated here, 35-foot height, decreased setbacks, and so on and so forth. But we, normally at this stage of the process, you're approving the plan.
Right.
And the plan doesn't have that detail on it right now. You haven't seen it. So I'd be concerned procedurally that we're premature. You haven't seen what it looks like with those adjustments, and we won't have a plan to go confidently forward with the PUD agreement. That's the procedure that I'm talking about, and so the idea was to postpone it, I think, is what you were discussing, so that we could, so that you could prepare that plan, bring it to staff, have them review it, and come back with an adjusted report at a future meeting. And instead of giving it a week, I'd suggest no later than 2 meetings from now, because I'm not sure 4
Okay.
weeks it would fit in there.
Okay. 2 meetings from now would be September
13th.
13th, right.
September 13th?
Or sooner.
yeah, no later than.
Motion.
Okay.
Okay. So we're moving to postpone it then?
Right.
Okay. Okay, then, sure, I will make a motion that we table or postpone to a date certain no later than September 13, but could be earlier, the consideration of a revised plan unit development plan to 2021 located at 27400 12 Mile Road, dated July 23, 2021. Is that correct?
Yep, support.
It's been moved by,
May I say something? I'm out of town September 13th. I think I should be here. Yeah, can we push it back to the next one?
we could go until the second meeting in September?
Yeah, why don't, okay.
Yeah, if you could just,
Yeah, because again, you can always come in earlier. This isn't stopping.
our side is done. It's the Robertson guys, and
Yeah,
then
okay.
whatever review that these guys have to do. We're ready to come back tomorrow if you need.
We could commit to the end of the week. I don't think that that'd be an issue of having the end of this week with a revised site plan. I know that's a lot of work on staff. I don't want to necessarily just throw them under the bus. So.
Well, I suppose if you're not done, we can always postpone again.
Right, and so Val's motion is still valid.
Yeah, so Val's motion is still valid.
Meeting in
Okay.
August, maybe push it. Any way we can get in second week, the next meeting in August, which is 2 weeks.
That's what we're hoping for.
That's what we're
Because,
trying.
we have some constraints
That's what we're trying to
on our
do.
purchase agreement
We got it.
also, which,
We're
That's
trying.
what we're trying to.
okay.
But we're just doing the date after that just for safety,
Just to
just
have-
in case, out of caution.
So we're shooting for the next one in August?
Yes.
Good for you guys?
I will have a site plan by this Friday.
Okay, so the motion,
Motion is still good.
okay, so the motion moved by Councilmember Knoll, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Bolaware, is to postpone until the 13th of September or sooner, and we are shooting for 2 weeks from tonight. Okay?
So the 23rd is what we're shooting for?
That's what we're shooting
Back in
for.
front of you?
We'd love to see you then.
Love to see you.
Okay. So is this a roll call vote or just
It
a
is
straight
not.
up?
Straight
Just
up.
Okay. So is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. I know you guys are working so hard, really. We know that. We know that.
Appreciate it, thank you.
We know that. Okay, and that brings us,
Oh, is that right?
I think so.
next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of the enactment of ordinance C-5-2021 to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8,
Oh, really?
Business Licensing, Article 1, Licenses to revise and update provisions throughout the article and approve for summary for publication. Okay, this is the business licensing.
Can I make a motion?
Yes,
Madam
you,
Mayor?
yes, you
Sure.
may.
Yes, I did. I'm recommending for approval of the enactment of ordinance C-5-2021 to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinance, Chapter 8, Business Licensing, Article 1, Licenses, to revise and update provisions throughout the article and approval of summary for publication.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Support.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Bolaware, seconded by Councilmember Massey. This is a roll call vote. Is there any discussion first? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Councilmembers Newland,
Yes.
Bulaware,
Yes.
Knoll,
Yes.
Massey,
Yes.
Strickfaden,
Yes.
and Mayor Barnett.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry. A little loud.
We like your voice.
Next is item number 6, consideration of approval of the enactment of ordinance C-6-2021 to amend the Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Business Licensing by adding Article 2, Smoking Lounges to license to regulate smoking lounges in the city in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, and support approval for summary of publication.
Support.
Well, no, I
he's gonna
wasn't
make a
making a
motion.
motion, I was just
sorry.
introducing the item.
I said I wouldn't do that again.
Do you want to make that a motion?
Yes.
It's been moved by Mr. Strickfaden that that motion be adopted. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Newland. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote.
Councilmembers Boulware?
Yes.
Noel?
Yes.
Massey?
Yes.
Strickfaden?
Yes.
Newland?
Yes.
And Mayor Barnett.
Yes. Next is item 9. Consideration of approval of enactment of ordinance C-7-2021 to amend Farmington Hills Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8, Business Licensing by adding Article 3, miniature golf courses, go-kart tracks, and arcades to license and to regulate miniature golf courses, go-kart tracks, and arcades by the city of Farmington Hills in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, and to approve this for summary for publication.
So moved.
It's been moved by Dr. Massey. Is there a second?
Support.
It's been seconded by Nolan Strickfaden. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmembers Noel?
Yes.
Massey?
Yes.
Strickfaden?
Yes.
Newland?
Yes.
Boulware?
Yes.
And Mayor Barnett.
Yes.
Thank you.
New business, item number 8, consideration of adoption of a fee resolution establishing licensing fees for miniature golf courses, go-kart tracks, and arcades within the city.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Strickfaden. Is there a second?
Second, I second.
Seconded by by Mayor Pro Tem Boulware. Is there any discussion? Yeah, I'm looking at you, Ms. Newland.
You know I don't want.
You can vote no.
Yeah.
Is there any
Regular vote.
discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
Weren't.
Oh, okay. Well, it's been supported, but is there any discussion?
What's that?
Is there discussion?
No discussion.
No discussion. Okay.
Supporting the motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Me.
All right.
Okay. Next is item number 9, consideration of adoption of fee resolution establishing licensing fees for smoking lounges within the city.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mr. Strickfaden. Is there a second?
There is second.
Seconded by Dr. Massey. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Number 10, consideration of approval of appointment of voting delegate and alternate to voting delegate to the Michigan Municipal League annual meeting on September 23rd, 2021.
So moved.
We need to name people.
Need someone to
Who's
go.
going?
Once
Actually,
again.
yeah, the 22nd.
I'm glad no one's
Anyone
here.
want to go?
We got to find somebody.
Yeah.
Probably be going.
We'll be going.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm hearing, I would nominate the mayor as the voting delegate, and the alternate would be the mayor pro tem.
Support.
Okay.
You guys said, you said something first, so.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Hope they go virtual. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that is done. Next, we've all received an attorney report. Any comments? Next item is to move into closed session, and as stated at the beginning, to review,
I don't see a closed session on the
Okay.
agenda.
I think we're done.
no, we have a closed session.
That was added, yes.
We amended the,
Oh, we need a motion to go into closed session.
yes, we need a motion
I
to go
would
into
make a motion to move into closed session to discuss item covered on 19.
item 19A.
Yep.
Support.
Needs to specifically state that purpose that is provided.
Specifically
Sorry to
state
detect.
this purpose. Closed session for the purposes of discussing a written confidential and privileged attorney-client letter with the city attorney.
Okay.
Support.
It's been moved by Dr. Massey, seconded by Councilmember Boulware. All in favor of going into
This
closed
is
session?
a roll call vote.
Oh, this is a roll call.
Yes. Councilmembers Massey?
Yes.
Strickfaden?
Yes.
Newland?
Yes.
Boulware?
Yes.
Noel?
Yes.
And Mayor Barnett.
Yes, but I will point out before we go into closed session that we will be coming back into open session for the purposes of adjournment. Welcome back from closed session. We are now at the point where we need a motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I would move adjournment.
Would you?
Would.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, it's been seconded by Councilmember Newland. All in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. No one says no. Good night, Farmington Hills. Tune in. We will be back on the 13th of, no,
23rd.
23rd, 2 weeks from tonight.